And we've seen reports over the last couple of weeks, both publicly and privately, that Senator Schumer is working towards introduction of the Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act in April. We don't know exactly when, but the fact that he is currently shopping it around to members of the Senate in order to get their feedback on it before they officially introduce it, I think is a really good sign. There's probably going to be some last minute tweaking involved in it. Unfortunately, no one that I'm aware of outside of Senate offices has actually seen what the official language looks like. And, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of comments submitted when the draft legislation was originally released back in July, including by NORML, by NCIA, by MCBA, by DPA, by like a slew of other groups. And so it'll be interesting to see exactly what from those comments made it into the introductory language. We know that Senator Schumer, as well as Senators Booker and Wyden, have been very engaged with stakeholders in this process. So we're very hopeful that they took those comments seriously, and that the bill that does get officially introduced is an improvement on the draft legislation, which admittedly was already very thoughtful and a pretty decent bill. But there were some serious drawbacks to it that we hope get addressed. But really, at this point, it's just a game of wait and see. Luckily, I think that there will be an impetus for him to keep that timeline with the fact that it appears increasingly likely that the MORE Act is going to get a House floor vote on at some point in March. So, I think that that'll be really useful in terms of both like gauging support for cannabis policy reform, as well as keeping the Senate on a relatively short timeline in terms of getting that bill introduced. And then hopefully we can start getting hearings in the Senate about comprehensive as well as incremental cannabis policy reform bills, and just the issue in general, which to this point really hasn't happened. There have been like a couple of small hearings here and there several years ago related to banking, but honestly, they were kind of hijacked by the opposition. So really hopeful that we're going to be able to foster a serious discussion about how to move forward with cannabis policy in this Congress, as well as in future Congresses at some point in the next few months, and hopefully before people start hitting the campaign trail.
Morgan, how much of the timing do you think is influenced by the fact that Nancy Mace introduced her bill recently?
Well, it certainly added to the momentum. I'm not sure if that was a deciding factor on any of the timing. Senator Schumer has been eager to introduce this bill for a while, but sometimes it takes time to balance all of the various interests and to be able to get all the stakeholders involved, as well as the fact that there are a lot of other issues going on dominating Congress's time. So, I think that the Mace bill is, the State Reform Act is really important in that it shows that there's Republican support for this, but also that the floor for where these bills are is rising. We in the past, we've seen Republican-led bills that primarily focus on not even including descheduling, but just on providing a carve-out for states to be able to do what they want. And now we're looking at Nancy Mace's bill, and it not only includes descheduling, but also includes very low tax rates and expungement measures. These are things that we probably wouldn't have seen a couple of years ago. So I think this is indicative of the fact that the Overton window on this issue is shifting, and what we can ask for and what we can expect is moving farther and farther closer to actually what we want.
And let me ask that question about what do we really want? And here's the big question. A lot of people we talk to about this are not confident that the federal government can come up with a regulatory agency that focuses just on cannabis or works with the Alcohol Beverage Commission to oversee it. There's not a lot of confidence with any federal run organization. Is this the time to try and do that? Or can we go after just decriminalization and banking and hopefully some expungement somewhere.
Well, if we're talking about a comprehensive descheduling bill, I think it's absolutely vital that we include a federal regulatory structure at least. Because if we don't, then it's pretty much up for grabs for federal agencies, and it could end up being something that nobody wants. So if we actually include it in the legislation, I think that that will at least provide us with a path forward. But conversely, I think that it's also important that any sort of federal regulations give a lot of leeway and credence to the states that have been pioneers in this issue. Clearly there is a need for some sort of overarching federal structure. How intrusive that is with what states are doing, I think, is up for debate. There are certainly some issues where the federal government will probably need to step in, and others where it won't. But overall, we're going to need to have some sort of a structure, and including it in the legislation that actually deschedules cannabis avoids a ton of problems. Regulations.
Well, we certainly welcome that. You mentioned that the MORE Act might be getting back onto the House floor. Wasn't Kamala Harris involved with that?
Vice President Harris, when she was a senator, was the lead sponsor of the MORE Act in the Senate.
Right.
Now
Who is
the Senate game is entirely CAOA, or the expectation of it.
Got it. And if the MORE Act does get introduced in the House and happens to pass, does that put more pressure on the Senate, or does it have them dig their heels in even more?
I think it absolutely helps build momentum for it in the Senate. Just to clarify, the MORE Act of 2021 absolutely has been introduced in the current Congress, and currently has 106 official co-sponsors. And I just learned today we're getting 2 more. So we're getting closer and closer to beating the 120 co-sponsor mark that we had last time when this was successfully voted upon in December of 2020. But I think that if nothing else, passage of this bill shows solid support for ending cannabis prohibition in the House, and helps speed along the timeline in the Senate and raise the priority level of the issue. Not to mention that it allows a room for debate to talk about which portions of which bill do we want to include in something that is going to be a bicameral legislation that eventually passes. Will something like that pass this year? I'm fairly doubtful, but anything's possible. But also, I think that it keeps the momentum alive and keeps the conversation alive in a way that allows us to start looking at alternatives to passing, or basically alternatives to not having anything passed this year, where we can start talking about beefing up the Safe Banking Act to include more social equity protections and more protections against predatory lending and discriminatory banking practices. It allows for more conversations about introduction in the Senate of the HOPE Act, and possibly pairing that with the Safe Banking Act. Basically, it just makes the conversation much more front of mind, and also reminds voters that this is an issue that is probably closer to being addressed than almost any other social or political or criminal justice issue that is out there. And if either Democrats or Republicans or both are interested in actually doing anything for the American people, this is low-hanging fruit.
Right. That seems to be a term that you lobbyists tend to use. Your former comrade, Michael Correa, used to say that about the Safe Banking Act. And of course, it did pass 6 times, but it certainly hasn't gone anywhere in the Senate. Let me ask you, is there a normal tote board? So every time you get another senator, you like chalk it up, there's like another X, and you're trying to get to a majority, obviously, of co-sponsors. But let me ask a question about government more than anything else. If you aren't a co-sponsor on a bill, does that mean that you're still iffy on it? And are those the targets for your discussions more than anything else?
No, there are plenty of people that voted in favor of the MORE Act in 2020 that were not co-sponsors of it at that time, and that currently aren't co-sponsors of it. We're hoping to change their minds to add additional support. I think that it's very important for lawmakers as well as their constituents to see who else is supporting these bills and who is 100% going to vote for it, absent any sort of changes or amendments. But that's sort of signaling that this is something I'm behind, and I'm going to back this bill and do what I can to help support it behind the scenes, I think is very important. And so we're urging as many people as we possibly can on both sides of the aisle to co-sponsor the MORE Act right now, because that's a very important signal to send in terms of what their priorities are for passing comprehensive cannabis policy reform legislation and descheduling.
Right. David, you got some?
You let me go into like sleep mode back here, Jimmy, but okay.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate the fact that we're putting you to sleep already. Yeah.
So there's been a lot of talk with editorials that have been published lately about trying to suspend the Dormant Commerce Clause. Are you aware of those conversations going on?
I am. NORML doesn't really take a position on interstate commerce. You know, in theory and hypothetically, we definitely support interstate commerce, but we don't really have a solid position on what that looks like or how it should be implemented. There are a lot of valid arguments on several sides of the issue between allowing it to immediately start unfettered as soon as cannabis is descheduled, limiting it or putting sunset clauses in place that would only allow social equity applicants to be able to engage in interstate commerce. There are some models right now being suggested that would, for a time being, and even before descheduling, allow individual states to enter into interstate commerce compacts that would just be limited within those states and would be able to be designed by those states to best protect consumers and their industries and social justice. There are a lot of opinions about this, a lot of discussion about this. In general, NORML isn't in the business of trying to pick kingmakers. We're trying to look out for what's best for the consumer. But in general, at some point, this is going to have to be treated like any other agricultural or commercial product, and to that end, interstate commerce is naturally going to come with that. So, I think that it's wise to be prepared for that, but in terms of exactly how that looks and how it's rolled out, we're really kind of taking a step back on it.
My view of that is that interstate commerce is going to help the little guy a lot more than the big guy. And as much as I've read the articles and the positions that interstate commerce, the big guys will just take over, I think the MSOs are the ones who are going to get crushed with interstate commerce. I would probably, if interstate commerce came into play tomorrow, I would short IIPR stock. I think the interstate commerce is going to allow plant from really inexpensive grow areas like the West Coast to come to the East Coast, and indoor grow operations that are primarily MSO driven won't be able to compete with that kind of a pricing. I think it's a little guy who's going to do much better.
And I'm gonna add on to the interstate commerce thing, Morgan. It happens all the time. Now it's not legal, okay? And now you're starting to see in the legal market recipes for various edibles or tinctures being shared and licensed from one state to the other. They all make it in a legal state. It's a loophole, but it exists already.
Well, I can't really speak to that. I will say that the same problems that the lack of interstate commerce has created for existing MSOs are also going to negatively affect entrepreneurs from marginalized communities that are also seeking to be MSOs. I think that there is a really solid argument in favor of allowing interstate commerce and trying to normalize the cannabis trade nationwide. That being said, there are a lot of arguments in place that are out there right now that I find fairly compelling in terms of who is best positioned to engage in interstate commerce. Additionally, we're looking at the potential for completely wiping out the cultivation and processing, or at least the cultivation industries in states that are not as well positioned,
the Northeast,
technologically to be able to do that. So that's something to consider as well, particularly if any of those areas happen to have successful social equity programs, which admittedly none of those are, as I'm sure that you guys saw from MCBA's report last week. But interstate commerce is going to be disruptive in a number of ways. So I think that it's absolutely vital that we look at it carefully. But again, I'm not in a position to say exactly what it should look like. I think that there are pros and cons on in every model that you look at.
It's estimated 10% of the commercial electricity consumption in Massachusetts is now being consumed by marijuana grow operations.
And from an environmental standpoint, I think that that's a very important aspect to look at.
Right. They're not good for the environment. It makes no sense to grow a plant of that size that has basically such a small fruit indoors. The ratio of plant size to output doesn't make sense, and it just consumes a ton of electricity. I personally think interstate commerce will actually give social equity a leg up, because social equity entrepreneurs, many of them have contacts. I've talked to plenty of them, and they have contacts in other states, especially on the West Coast. They'll be the first ones on JetBlue to fly to the West Coast to start to bring product back at a much better price, and they won't be beholden to the larger industrial indoor grow operators. They'll have much better pricing. They'll be able to compete head on with the MSOs with minimal problem. And in new states, think of Connecticut, New Jersey, New York, where plant material is going to be very scarce in the early part of the equation. They'll be able to get plant material. That's going to be more product manufacturers. I don't see how it hurts social equity with interstate. I think it is the one thing that can level the playing field.
Well, up until very recently, the prevailing argument was that interstate commerce would be a net boon for social equity applicants and licensees in every state. But recently some arguments have surfaced that I think are fairly compelling and worth looking at, particularly from folks like Shalene Title at the Parabola Center. So, I recommend that people look at both sides of these arguments and come to their own conclusions.
Well, I tell you, we are going to be focusing on the role that race has played in cannabis history in the United States and where it stands right now. And we all know that the Last Prisoner Project is trying to get all those who have been convicted of possession crimes out of jail. They've targeted, I believe, a guy by the name of Kevin Allen now to free. And I believe he was in Louisiana serving a life sentence for a $20 cannabis deal to an undercover cop. And, when I read stuff like that, it obviously really, really bothers me. How do we undo? Are we doing enough to undo the wrongs of how the failed war on drugs has happened here, and how Black people are 3.5 more times liable to get arrested for possession crimes? Are we starting to see that at all? Because I read a report from Rutgers University this week that is showcasing again that even though New Jersey voted it legal, they still made an awful lot of arrests that had to do with race. And it bothers me that it's 2022. We've come so far, and these kinds of things are still happening.
In answer to your question, are we doing enough? Hell no, we aren't.
Good.
We can always do much, much more. Talking about arrest rates, I think it's important to point out that post-legalization at the state level, a lot of times racial disparities in arrest persist for whatever violations are still on the books and able to be charged, particularly because some of the federal issues that are involved, particularly because of public consumption laws that are in place. But you do have to look at the fact that the overall number of arrests dropped significantly in these states. So we're talking about real people who are no longer being arrested. The disparities still exist, and those are problems that are systemic in policing, not just in cannabis issues.
And in the NFL too. I'm going to throw that in there, okay, because of what happened to Brian Flores. Okay, we know that racism exists in this country. Sometimes it's as blatant as it is with the example of the NFL, and sometimes it's an example of arrest records of Black people versus white people, even though both races use it the same percentage.
I mean, and I think it goes beyond just the negative justice issues. Clearly, just stopping arrests or decreasing arrests is not enough. It's definitely a huge step in the right direction, but we need to start looking at or continue to look at things like repairing the harms caused by prohibition, by helping the communities that have been most impacted by prohibition build generational wealth and get access to new opportunities that have been denied to them, by providing for record clearance and expungement and resentencing. And I mean, yeah, you guys know that I got into this because of firsthand witnessing sentencing disparities. So, I mean, these are things that we have to address, not just decreasing the number of arrests. However, at the same time, does the guy that's about to do 5 years in Angola for a joint really give a crap if there's a community center built in his neighborhood off of cannabis tax revenue? So we really have to balance these things between, the fact that we clearly have to move more from a negative justice to a positive justice paradigm when we're looking at cannabis policy reform. And, a lot of times that will take a while. That will take longer than if it would just be, simple decriminalization or depenalization or removing the possibility of arrest. But we do need to pursue that and pursue reparative justice when it comes to the drug war and particularly cannabis prohibition. But as long as we're doing that, we do need to be honest with ourselves that the delays that come with being able to get those gains that help everybody and help the historical injustices that have occurred because of prohibition sometimes result in more people getting arrested. And these are real people who are dealing with the real collateral consequences of that. So, I think it's something that we have to think about and be honest about, not necessarily to eschew those decisions, but it's necessary to be honest with ourselves about it because there are consequences to our actions when it comes to advocacy, whichever way you go.
Right. Absolutely. Hey, always a good discussion with you, Morgan Fox. We talk about a lot of different issues. You got opinions on a lot of them, and you give us some insight on really what goes on in the trenches in the federal government. And we have a lot of respect for those who are fighting for this policy change, like yourself. So third Friday of every month is always going to be reserved for you. You'll always have a place here. And I thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me, guys. Always a pleasure.
All right, there goes Morgan Fox.
Thanks,
now
Morgan.
Normal. And we're going to take our 4:20 break, listen to Jonathan Edwards. When we come back, we will continue our discussion about that racial disparity in our country when it comes to cannabis, and also some success stories about people who have entered into the business and are viable and successful. So don't go away. Green Rush Live continues after this.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 19... I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just... like every other night, just gonna lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Brodsky, everybody. There's nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm gonna sit down in my rented car. I'm gonna jam it into drive. Gonna head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on every night and day. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Nice. It's Friday. Thank God. Thank God Jonathan Edwards is joining us live in the WSCA studios.
I'm a fan.
That's Liz Grow, Pro Cannabis Media's newest show host for a new show, Calling All Growers with Liz Grow. Liz is a High Times TV personality who'll be joining our talk show program starting in February.
I picture a company that stands the test of time.
Stopping at nothing to meet the people who are growing this plant generation after generation.
Calling All Growers will be more than just another interview and talk show, especially if you subscribe to the Calling All Growers workshop and webinar. That's 2 weeks after the live talk show on the same growing network, Pro Cannabis Media and PCM TV.
This is a show about interviewing the top growers in the game. It's a platform where they can share tips, tricks, and secrets for those growers coming up. Cultivators are some of my favorite people in the world, and I can't wait to talk to some of these growers.
It all starts on Wednesday, February 9th, live at 8 p.m. Eastern on PCM TV, on Roku, Apple, and ProCannabisMedia.com. Subscription-only workshops 2 weeks later on the 23rd. Sign up today to hold your spot.
What's your favorite strain?
Free.
If you're a grower or interested in learning more, tune in or...
You're missing out. Calling All Growers with Liz Grow.
Well, here we are again, TGIF. Thank God it's Friday and another live edition of Green Rush Live, the Business of Cannabis talk show. As far as we know, the only 2-hour live Friday afternoon Business of Cannabis talk show in the universe. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. So happy to be here and so happy to be talking about the international scene of cannabis for the majority of this show. But at the top of the show, we always feature one interview. Usually it's a mover and a shaker, somebody who had something to do in the news, perhaps over the last week. We've had a lot of pretty impressive people on this show, from the CEO of MJ Biz, Chris Walsh, he comes on here all the time, to Chris Beals, the CEO of WM Technologies, which we know in the business is Weed Maps. He's been on with us as well. And now we welcome in not just one gentleman, but two gentlemen. Rick Thompson from Michigan is going to be my co-host today, and Edmund DeVoe from the New Jersey Cannabis Business Association. Edmund and Rick, great to see you guys. And again, thank you for joining me here on Friday.
Thank you, Jimmy.
All right. So the last time we saw Edmund was a few months ago when New Jersey was just starting to come around to the fact that, hey, we've got to create an adult use market. What are we going to do? So Edmund, give us an update. I know the applications are in the works. I know there's plenty of news going on in New Jersey. Bring us up to date on what the scene is in business in the New Jersey cannabis scene.
Thanks so much, Jimmy, and good to see you again, Rick. So New Jersey, we're moving slowly but surely. I like to tell people that the grass is greener and we are getting to the other side. So as you pointed out, it was back in August of 2021, the New Jersey Cannabis Regulatory Commission actually published the regulations, or its first iteration of regulations. And from that point, it's been all work on their part, trying to put together the pieces, listening to the community, listening to the public. And the New Jersey Cannabis Association has been right there with them, trying to help them put things together. And as you pointed out, the adult use market is here and it's here to stay. And as of December 15th, 2021, the application portal, in other words, we're not going to volumes, thousands of pages of documents being handed in, being rushed down to Trenton. It's an application portal. And that application portal opened up for 3 of the licensing categories of the 6, which includes cultivation, processing, and laboratory testing. And as of March 15th of this year, we expect the application portal to open up for retail establishments.
And how many applications might show up and how many licenses are going to be distributed?
As of last count, we had about 300, a little over 300 applications in the portal, and they are divided up amongst the cultivation and processing.
Right.
So we expect to see hundreds more. The actual portal was opened with over 600 openings, but we're at 300 or so actual applications that have been submitted.
There you go. And Rick Thompson's from Michigan, a much more mature market than New Jersey, obviously, maybe even more mature than the Massachusetts market. In fact, I think it is. Rick, when he described slow and steady, I mean, has that changed in Michigan?
Well, actually, it's better than our launch here in Michigan. We tried to encourage the Marijuana Regulatory Agency to stagger licensure like you're doing in New Jersey, to put forth first cultivation and processing facilities and then license retail afterwards. Instead, they decided to do everybody all at once, and it created a big backlog of licensing also at the MRA, as well as in an uneven and unsteady marketplace. You had retailers that were open that had very little product to put on their shelves, and it was difficult for some of them to make bills right off the bat because we had such a variance there. So kudos to New Jersey for doing it in a more intelligent way.
And actually, I think that's an advantage for all the new states that are coming into the market. They can look at what happened in Washington State and Colorado, and then look at California and Arizona and Oklahoma, and perhaps learn what not to do, right, Ed, and try and make it work for that specific state.
You know, Jimmy, that's a great point. In fact, one of the things that we do in our communications with the community, that everybody wants it to happen, and we caution them. Look, there's no playbook. There's nothing in advance. This is being created from scratch. I know people refer to other states that are more mature than us, but every state is different. There's going to be 50 different ways, plus the District of Columbia, 51 different ways of doing this industry. And so what we're doing, Rick, thank you so much. I will definitely convey that because there's a few of us that have been, we've been saying, look, this is the way to go. We've been supportive of the CRC, much to the chagrin of those advocates that have pushed for so long, and I get it. But slow and steady wins the race.
There you go. Slow and steady wins the race. Isn't that Yertle the Turtle? And isn't that book about Mitch McConnell, I think, or something?
I think it goes back to Aesop, but you get whatever reference you want there, Jimmy.
Thank you, Rick. I do it too, but I just, every time I hear any kind of thing like that, that face comes into my brain for some reason.
Well, you know, to be cliche, and New York likes to poke their finger in our eye every now and then, but I always tell them, first of all, we beat you to it. So the tortoise did in fact beat the hare in that instance. And again, thanks again, Rick, for pointing out that this is probably the better way to go by and large.
Access to capital, Edmund, that's the biggest issue for everybody. I don't care if you're a grower, a cultivator, a testing lab, an entrepreneur. Everybody's looking to have access to capital. What's going on in New Jersey in regards to the social equity applicants? And are there any funds emerging that even they have a shot at taking advantage of?
You know, looking down the road at this challenge, the Regulatory Commission and the legislation are in agreement that if you are an applicant that, or actually if you're an investor, you can invest into up to 7 operations. Now, you can't get a majority stake, but it's allowing private capital to enter into the market. Now, we do have a couple of financial institutions that have come forward to do banking, but to your point, Jimmy, loans and grants are something in the future. It's being discussed, but allowing private capital to come in a regulated way, protecting the potential operator from venture capitalists or vulture capitalists, if you want to, again, be cliche, but we are in fact allowing for investment. So I'll digress just for a second, because that is one of the things that we found very challenging. We have social equity applicants. The state did a wonderful job by actually creating a definition for social equity applicant, and income was certainly one of those measures. And so we worry about the difference between somebody who likes cannabis and wants to be in business and somebody who's in business and wants to be in cannabis. So we want to make sure that we do the right things to protect new entrants into the private sector, period.
Gotcha. I got you. And it's interesting. Well, first of all, I got to ask about growth with the Cannabis Business Association. How many members do you have right now?
So we're looking at about 1,000 members.
Wow.
And in terms of our newsletters and our events, mostly our newsletters, we are actually touching over 2,000 people, majority in the state. I'm sure there are some people outside the state that receive our information, but we are in fact growing. We are getting larger companies to join now. In fact, and I may have mentioned it on your show, we view ourselves now as the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce. Mm-hmm. We represent not only current license holders, one of whom sits on our board, but we represent future applicants and all of the ancillary businesses that are going to play in this market. So we are the Chamber of Commerce, and we're providing opportunities for all of them to get engaged in this.
Rick, you're pretty familiar with the businesses in Michigan as far as cannabis goes. I'm pretty sure you're involved with one association, aren't you? At least one, as you're an executive director of Normal. I know that in Michigan.
Right, but I'm not a member of any of the cannabis business organizations. We do have 2 very large cannabis business organizations here, or rather one very large numerically and one very large with reach. And one of them is a real son of a bitch, and one of them is a real compassionate, functioning, helpful organization. What are you doing in New Jersey to not develop that son of a bitch attitude that sometimes befalls cannabis business associations?
Well, if you watched yesterday's CRC meeting, one of them has crossed that son of a bitch threshold. Look, we are the first, and we are in fact the largest trade association in the state. Others have cropped up along the way, and I'm separating them from the advocacy organizations like Normal, like UMCR, like Minorities for Marijuana. So in terms of the business structure, there's only maybe 3 of us, 2 of us, but we represent the entire industry. The other one represents just the current license holders, of which there's 12. Mm-hmm. There's 12 that are being bought over from the old medical marijuana program. Now, we did in fact issue licenses based on 2018 and 2019 rounds that were held up in court, but they're months away from operating. So we may in fact see what you experienced, Rick, where you're going to see 2018, 2019 kind of running in and converging with the people that are in the portal today. But by and large, you've got us, and then you've got the Cannabis Trade Association, which just represents the license holders. And then you have a couple of others that are out there.
And there's normally specialty trade associations too, a producer or a processors trade association, a testing laboratory group, because there are special individual reasons why those particular industries would want to lobby on a unique basis as opposed to having just a generalized lobby effort. So I can see where any market, especially in a state as large as Jersey, would have multiple interests that would be reflected by business associations.
Now, what's interesting, to your point, Rick, and I may have missed the nuance there, the fact is, yes, the National Laboratory Association is present in New Jersey. And in fact, the Cannabis Association does in fact have a laboratory working group. We are working with a group of 7 or 8 labs that have come to us to say, look, we've got a message. Can you help us develop that message? We absolutely have recommendations for regulation. So yes, we are helping them.
So important when you go to talk to legislators that you have the actual people in the specific industry whose rules are being potentially changed by legislation, having those particular areas of specialty. In our experience, it really has worked out for those particular industries to be able to communicate with the lawmakers, not just on a statewide level, but also in some of the larger municipalities too, because oftentimes they develop rules which are contradictory to state rules and oftentimes don't make a lot of sense. I don't know if you've experienced that in New Jersey or not.
Well, it's interesting. We're getting there. Again, just going back to yesterday's CRC meeting, I did in fact receive some emails from the lab group that we're working with. And they have other recommendations, and we're going to move those recommendations forward. So it's a work in progress, to your point. Thank you.
Right. I do want to bring up an event that's happening. I think it's next week because I just signed up for it. Our friends at ArcView in New York are running a webinar for the Minority Cannabis Business Association. And I want to give a plug out there because to me, this is what I'd like to see more of in this industry. You know, everybody's looking to make money, right? I mean, that's the object of the business game. Okay. Sometimes I lose track of that, but that's true. Okay. Now, and it's a money grab. Everybody wants to make it fast, get in, get out, make a killing, go retire, whatever you need to do. But again, that money pool, for the most part, is still being controlled by the white private equity person. We're starting to see some athletes create funds for social equity applicants. Now you've got ArcView, one of the largest funders in the world and in cannabis, is now at least doing some open webinars to share some of the education that they can with that group. This is what I want to see as socially responsible capitalism in place in cannabis. Is that what's going on in that world in New Jersey? And I'm sure you're familiar with the Minorities Cannabis Business Association too, Ed.
Yes, so thank you, Jimmy. The thought is this, and I shared with you somewhat jokingly as we were planning for today, there's the one thing that keeps me up at night. And the one thing that does keep me up at night with respect to the industry is the fact that when we issued the regulations and when we passed the legalization legislation, I believe many minorities heard, if you're a minority, a woman, or a disabled veteran, you're going to get a license. And I believe that that's what people heard. And what we try to do is balance that notion of wanting success and tempering it so that you don't get disappointed, that you stay involved, that you in fact seek financial resources and not bankrupt yourself chasing a dream. So with that, we are engaged with a number of social organizations at the grassroots level, like the NAACP, like the Camden Business District or Business Association, the statewide Hispanic Chamber. And so we are reaching out to all of those individuals who probably need to develop business acumen. So that's the position that we're taking. And so we're addressing it. The legislation addresses it by mandating more or less certification points go to school, get certified, keep up with your education in this industry. So we have been addressing it. We want to continue to address it because it really is an issue that could really hurt the industry.
There's a question in the chat room from Miggy, who's one of our regular watchers and listeners, and he also takes part in the cannabis legalization news show that Thomas Howard produces out of Illinois every week. And Thomas is one of our correspondents for We Talk News. I can say I know that he called in a report yesterday because I listened to it. That being said, a question from the chat room is about the gray market. Now, first of all, that term itself is indefinable, undefined. You can't really define it, but you tell me what you think is the gray market in New Jersey. And Rick, that means you're going to get a chance to tell me what the gray market is in Michigan.
Rick, do you want to go first?
Well, I was the gray market in Michigan for a number of years. We had a chain of 5 illegal dispensaries in the state between 2009 and 2012. So when you talk about the black market, then the gray market, and then the regulated market, I think what you're talking about are facilities that look and feel and try to behave as much as possible like a regulated marketplace. For example, at Big Daddy's, our chain, we checked medical cards. We never sold to anyone that wasn't a registered patient. We never sold to anyone that was a minor. We were very careful about making sure there wasn't diversion of product. So there were a lot of ways in which the industry in Michigan, in the unregulated methodology, was still just as responsible as the regulated system today. And to be honest, we had 500 sites in the state of Michigan prior to 2016 when the medical marijuana laws, the business laws, came into effect. So it was quite a big thing here in the state. I think that's basically the difference between what we'd call the completely black market, the legacy market versus the gray market, trying to act as in a way that looks like a regulated function.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. I'm in total agreement with what you've shared. Legacy, all right, that is now the term.
It is.
Right.
Schooled, much like just a few years ago, stop calling it marijuana, it's cannabis. I'm like, okay. And then some people came to me and said, no, control the word, it's marijuana. Okay, I get it. So it is a legacy market, and our legislation is in fact, and the regulations are providing a way to come under the regulatory umbrella. So that's the push. It's not only expungement of records, but if you haven't had your records expunged, it's an opportunity. If you've just got a simple possession charge, we want you to come under the regulatory umbrella. Much to your point, Rick, there are those folks that are out there and they're pushing the limits. They're opening up consumption lounges. They're selling product because they're saying it's legal. They're allowing people to consume product in the shop because you can't get arrested. And so I look at those, and my concern is this: some have a very professional downtown look and feel, and others have cropped up with big cannabis leaves painted on them, neon green. And I even heard one place has armed guards. Don't know how they got them, but that is the kind of thing that I want us to watch. I want us to be careful of. And look, if you're listening, please come under the regulated umbrella. Then this way we can avoid issues about carding people when they do come into a facility. We can handle issues like designs on buildings, what's appropriate for a downtown. Come under the umbrella. We want you there. But I get it. There's a lot of pride in legacy markets. Everyone knows the weed man, right? You say weed man nationally. Ed Forshawn in Trenton has been a legacy marketeer for decades and continues to do so. I don't think there's anybody that wants to tackle that issue, but Ed, come under the regulated umbrella. It's there, and I think he really is considering it, and that is the fix.
There you go.
I'd like to revisit something that was talked about just a moment or two ago about educating people and requiring certain amount of education prior to allowing them to get into the cannabis industry. Logically, this makes sense, but time is our enemy. And what I mean by that is every day that someone is studying to learn about cannabis and to be qualified for a cannabis business license, somebody else snatches one up. And sooner or later, all of the good licenses and the opportunities are gone. And when the legacy market people come into this opportunity after they've passed all these hurdles, there may not be a realistic opportunity for them to realize that American dream. So I completely understand why we want to try and make sure people that are given the opportunity to have a business can do it successfully. But I'm also concerned about making people wait to find their fortune, if that makes sense.
Right. So Rick, to that point, I don't think it's a wait, but it certainly is a requirement, either upon licensing or after a certain time after you are licensed, that you do get some form of certification, whether you're touching the plant. Well, I believe it's all about touching the plant. If you're doing transportation or home delivery, have a clean driving record. But for other operations, aspects of operations, it can come later.
Gotcha. Hey, Edmund DeVoe, it's always a pleasure to talk with you, sir. I also am going to give you a compliment because I watched the interview you did with Senator, is it Nicholas Scuderi? Did I do that?
Scutari,
right?
Yes, Nick Scutari.
Whatever it was. You know what? Scuderi is probably a football player. My brain is still in sports. Anyway, you did a really nice job. And the one thing that I did take out of that interview was a soundbite about home grow, which is not allowed according to these regulations at this time in New Jersey, but he definitely left the window open for future changes. That's got to be encouraging to you.
Absolutely. It's again, one of those questions that we get, where do you fall on that issue? And ultimately, look, whether we support it or not, it's going to be a function of the legislature and it's going to be a function of the CRC. When somebody puts that bill in, introduces the bill, we'll be right there with the medical community supporting medical home grow.
Right. And you know what? Those are the people that need it the most as a medicine, not the adult use recreational fun group, if you will. Not that I'm dissing them at all. We get it. Okay. But this is still a plant medicine. And that alone has got us to this point. So I never want people to forget that is still in the works, if you will. Edmund DeVoe, New Jersey Cannabis Business Association. Thank you again for coming on. You're turning into a regular. You're welcome anytime. And I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, Rick. Always good to see you.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
Difference is building a solution for that individual. Not just a custom, here's a box, here's a video, here's how you make your VMS. We custom design and custom build every situation for exactly what the customer needs. And we keep the costs low. We have multiple tiers, as far as what you're looking at on the cost side of things. If you want a one-time, where you just pay one initial cost, we have that. If you want to maintain your system and have the highest protection and highest capabilities and highest upgrades at all times, we have different plans for you. But we scale it so it's scalable and affordable 100%.
Pro Cannabis Media programming is available live and on demand on our Facebook page at Pro Canna Media, on Instagram at Pro Cannabis Media, on LinkedIn also at Pro Cannabis Media, on YouTube and YouTube Live on Pro Cannabis Media, Twitter at Pro Canna Media, and on twitch.tv/Pro Cannabis Media. So like, share, and subscribe to all of our content, newsletters, and shows live or on demand.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Meet Caduceus Science, the alternative wellness company. You know CBD, but how about CBG, CBN? That's right, Caduceus Science produces a range of full-spectrum products, all lab-tested in small batches to maintain the highest quality of products. CaduceusScience.com. Hey, you want to grow your own plants? Check out Style Lighting's Grow Kit. It has everything you need to become an expert home grower and bring the power of the sun indoors. Style Lighting uses TCP's high-powered commercial LEDs that deliver twice the output in the market. The Grow Kit has a grow bag, a timer, chains to hang the light, and of course the best in the business lighting system by TCP. Check out stylelighting.shop for more information. Hi, everyone. Thank God it's Friday afternoon again and time for the Green Rush Live show from the Boston, Massachusetts area. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to all of the Pro Cannabis Media content because we're getting bigger and bigger guests. And I bring in Christopher Smith from the American Cannabis Report as my co-host today. And Christopher, good to see you, sir.
Hi, Jimmy. How are you? Good to see you.
Good. As always, a busy week in the world of cannabis. We got the jobs report from Leafly, and we had an incredible move in the New York State area where that state basically offered all the hemp farmers an opportunity to jump right into the cannabis THC world with no other paperwork, which is, I think, a really cool thing. The farmers there are extremely excited, and we'll be talking with one a little bit later on this show because we are going to be focused on the world of hemp. But first, we're going to be talking about the world of cannabis MSOs, and we're so proud to have a CEO of AUSA and Audacious. His name is Terry Booth. He's not the first time he's been on this show. So Terry, again, welcome back to Green Rush Live.
Thanks, Jimmy. Interesting you're talking about hemp. That's the reason I was within minutes of being late for this call. I was on a 2-hour call with the hemp company in New York. So we're all over that. It's an amazing development. It's something that they worked hard on, that farmer community of hemp, and it's passed. It's real, and it's going to be exciting for a first mover advantage in New York State.
Oh, fantastic. I'm glad that you were glad you're familiar with that. Of course you are. You're the CEO of a major company. Is New York getting it right, Terry?
To be known, right? We've got the final regulation, not the final, the first draft regulation, which is normally the final. Once they put out a draft reg, there's not many changes that you see after. Legislation is done. It's anticipated that comes out in 2 weeks. They certainly want to do the right thing. You know, we've been doing our best to try to help, if you will, with any of the regs, and all companies try and do that. And it gives you some insight into what they're up to and timing of New York State. But the beautiful thing is it's going adult usage, man. And it's not far away. New Jersey's there as well. And, it's a population center, and it's going to be a significant amount of cannabis that trades hands in an adult usage market in New York State. So it's another huge step for the cannabis space in America.
That's great. And Christopher, I know you're familiar with this. It seems that whenever new states come on board, introduce adult use cannabis, they run out really fast. So this is why the New York people decided, the legislature decided this would be a good time to actually get cannabis on the shelves. I'm guessing you believe that's a good move too, right?
Well, sure. It allows them to sort of stock up and have the stores be ready for opening day and for opening week and month. Really, if they had to start at square one and then try to catch up, of course, they would be way behind. So strategically, for the first period, of course, it's a good move.
And Terry, what's the latest on Audacious? You seem to be always growing and acquiring and booming. Tell me what's happening.
Well, it's a good testament to this management team. I've not been here a year yet, joined them on March 9th. And in that 1 year, we've gone from only being in Nevada doing $28,000 a quarter to being in Nevada, California, Missouri, working with a group in Massachusetts, obviously all over what's happening in New York, and looking at creative deals to do. The loose deal is wrapped up. The herb deal is almost wrapped up in Cali. We're selling product in California in a good way. We're selling everything we can put on the shelves. So it is a matter of getting product, and the way to get product is either to grow it or acquire it. We're doing both, and that expansion is in process. We finally nailed down some, financing. It wasn't big, but it keeps us rolling along in the same strategy that we have. Certainly, we're waiting for rules to change in the States. I think every cannabis company is. It'd be nice to be able to deduct your expenses from your revenues like regular business folks, and it would be nice to bank. Right. And that's all coming. I said before, I think on the interview, Jimmy, that we take our hats off to the U.S. cannabis space on how they've managed to continue the wave, to continue to grow, to continue to make state by state better. Sure, there's been some, screw ups along the way. Some of the social equity wasn't done like it was meant to be done in some of the states. You're seeing that. But, when you mention New York, is it going to be a good system? They're certainly trying. To correct any previous mistakes that may have been made in, in the social equity piece and in you see with the hemp farmers, letting them into the play. They had a terrible go of it, if you will, on the hemp side. The regulations weren't quite cut out or made what they expected to be doing with CBD derived from hemp. And guess why? I think you could look to the FDA a little bit. Not approving the ingestible, even though World Health Organization said it was cool. But then the FDA has been pretty busy with this COVID thing. So, it's a bunch of different factors still lead to growth. It's still moving forward. And I applaud the U.S. cannabis space for doing that, and a bunch of great entrepreneurs and good folk.
We're trying here. Christopher, I'm going to allow you to ask Terry a direct question, because I know you are really good at that.
I think that's a great point, Terry. I think it's so important for us to recognize that we're in the middle of this great development of this. We're not at the end looking backwards. We're not in a mature industry looking backwards. We're in the very beginning stages. The Leafly report just came out this week, and I thought that the jobs numbers, for example, were very interesting. It showed that the cannabis jobs have increased 30% since last year. It's now there are more workers in cannabis than a great number of more industries, three times more than dentists. I read things like that. But I thought that there was something very interesting in the report that was way back a little bit, which is that the economics group that did the research determined that the industry was really only about 25% on the legal side. So 75% of the industry still in the United States is still on the illicit side. So there's a huge way to go. What do you think about the opportunity going forward, and especially with your company?
On the gray market side, you're right. In California, you really see that, and it does affect the progress in California. California itself is difficult to navigate towards profitability unless you're in the multiple verticals, and then you pick your poison on the different municipalities, because then there's a different set of rules there.
Right.
But they also have the gray side of the market on the West Coast, and in some of the interior states, and it's big. It's a big industry, and how do you transition from that one to the next? Some of the states are looking at bringing in with open arms those industry pioneers, I like to call them. Passing that baton is an important transition. Being part of the community culture, respecting that as a company is important, in my opinion. That's what we're all about. But to hear those numbers, doesn't it make you smile? How we're affecting
Absolutely
in a positive way. And I imagine some other statistics have gone down, like opiate usage as well. We've certainly seen that in the medical system in Canada. Proof positive, like not something we're saying, we've proven it. So you take the medical systems, the adult usage systems. Not everybody is driving into the back of cars either. Everybody,
right.
all the fear factors that went into
right.
The stigma related to cannabis are waning. They're going
Sure.
away, and the acceptance of it is amazing. And I love to see those economic numbers, because that's what your Politico will listen to. Employed people contributing to the bottom line at the tax house. Important stuff. So
Sure.
It's all great stuff, and I'm glad Leafly puts out those type of reports. I haven't read it. I'm embarrassed. I've got to get on that type of stuff and be better at it. But it sounds great.
Yeah, it just came out, and there are those high level bullet points about the number of jobs and the percentages and how many more hairstylists and dentists and those things are novelty. They're interesting cocktail talk and everything. But I think that the growth of the industry is so important. The other thing I think is interesting, you mentioned the FDA. And it seems to me that we have sort of, it's almost like the grownups are fighting, right? We have the FDA and the DEA, the Food and Drug Administration fighting to understand what should be allowed and to help protect the health of people. And we have the Drug Enforcement Administration fighting for their own budget, fighting to keep their slice, fighting to keep down cannabis, et cetera, et cetera. That seems to be the battle
Well,
in the federal government here.
I got one more for you. The Department of Agriculture just came out with their hemp report this week too. So my question to Terry, I'm going to just take it right from you, Christopher. Great points.
Sure.
Where would you like to see this industry regulated? Should it be under one specific in the United States, whether that be the ABC, the DEA, or the DOA, which is Department of Agriculture? Where do you think it's going to end up on the federal side as far as regulations and governance?
God forbid it's not with the DEA.
Right. Yes, absolutely.
To check off. I imagine FDA would be sort of where it should be. It is, especially when you get into the medical cannabis, that should be FDA, right? The Department of Health and whatnot. Agriculture for sure. I mean, they're the ones that did this amazing thing with moving it from the CDSA hemp, CBD derived from hemp rather. Big step. America were the first to do it. And I think they put themselves at a distinct advantage, but there's just this lag in the FDA approving the ingestible. We did a deal in Southeast Asia with a group now where they've legalized the ingestible CBD. We're the first American or any North American company to do a deal with legal CBD with a group in Thailand. So it's moving forward in other countries, and America is going to be a little bit behind it if they don't get on this decision on the ingestible side of it. And that goes to the agricultural point you're making, Jimmy. I don't know what that report looks like. I don't imagine it looks that great for what went down in hemp, but that happens. Everybody ran to it. They're going to run back to their lentils. It is a difficult plant to grow. It's a difficult plant to harvest. If you've ever seen hemp get combined, I've certainly seen it in the food hemp industry. It's very, very tough plant. It's a thick stalk. You need special equipment. You don't want to be laying it in the dirt when you're going to be selling it for food. So it has to go onto conveyor system. So that equipment is in Lithuania, but it's not fully in America yet. And that really hurt with yields and then the price of CBD, right? Because CBD has still got a little bit of a cloak on it. It's not being widespread in the CPG industry. Everybody's confident in doing CBD topicals. You're not going to get busted for that. But to put it on the shelves of big box in a gummy, not there yet. To put it in a sport drink, not there yet. Is it around the corner? Hell yeah. And that's going to be a massive expansion of CBD. And at least the technology has caught up to some extent where they're able to totally remove THC. And that'll be a requirement when it goes mainstream in the CPG industry. But the THC industry as well, this adult usage, when you compare it to alcohol, for instance, or other illicit drugs, it's just so much safer. The only way you can get killed by cannabis if a bale drops out of an airplane on top of your head and snaps your neck. Those are important things. They may be fun to say, but they're true. And that's the movement, and that's why it's having success. Once the states are confident and they feel good, and it didn't wreck other states, these pioneer states that went at it, and Cali and the Colorados and Washingtons and whatnot, they're seeing nothing but benefits from having this as a part of their economy. A bit of a long question or a long answer to a short question, but I do see agriculture really taking over the hemp industry, and I do see hemp taking over CBD. I think that will be outside of the, let's call it the MSO space, where adult usage is the prime mover and certainly brings the bigger dollar. But CBD is going to be in demand, and it's going to make the farmers a lot happier. So I think you'll see that hemp report improve over time as CBD comes into mainstream.
We just started a show about growing called Calling All Growers. It's hosted by Liz Grow, High Times TV personality. And I've also gotten a crash course in sustainable cultivation. I was at a growing conference a few weeks ago that brought growers from Humboldt County, the Emerald Triangle, to the East Coast for the first time to talk about organic farming. Terry, how do you, what's your opinion and what's the company's rulings about sustainable cultivation?
That's cool that you asked that. Maybe it's because you're having me today, but we're all over that. And we're on top of that with our group from Alps. And it's not just with respect to cannabis. Sustainable environmental governance is a big thing right now on the planet. And it's an important thing that you reduce those footprints for when you're growing food, right? And it applies to cannabis as well, reducing that carbon footprint. Alps is doing deals in Dubai, in Iceland, and in America on the vertical grow for lettuce and tomatoes. I always use the example of growing a carrot on a farm in Mexico and shipping it to Alaska in a truck. And how much does that impact the environment, the diesel fuel that it's using? And when the carrot gets to Alaska, you could whip a horse with it. It's, it's not a high quality vegetable. We can build a facility in Alaska that has the same price or similar pricing to what they're paying now for their import of produce, have a dramatically reduced environmental footprint, and be attractive to SEG companies like Blackstones and whatnot, who are all over this SEG space. So it's important for cannabis to jump on that bandwagon. It's important for organic growth to be out there. Organic is not only a great word, it's better tasting vegetables. I always espouse that with my wife. She's big on organics. You better eat them quick though, because the organics don't stay as long because they've zapped the shit out of the other vegetables that you're buying, but they taste better. And there's reasons for that. And it's not going away. What's it called? Genetically modified GMO. Like that's a swear word in Europe. GMO is just not something that happens. It's something you put in your mouth in Europe. And it's exactly. So I'm all over it. The Mr. Natural brand that Audacious has coming online. I think we've now got some products out there. It's all about organic growth. Bob Luciano, the Rastafarian priest, Vietnam War vet from the Bronx, amazing grower. He's grown cannabis longer than I've been alive, and he's an organic grower of cannabis, and mainly bases his cultivars and his products on veterans. He's a Vietnam War vet as well, and he's an organic grower, and it is a better plant in my opinion. It's more expensive to grow that, but your connoisseurs love it, and certainly the profiles of those plants can be improved, and the way you grow organically can be improved, and it is. The guys are doing it out there, and the gals are doing it. So it's great that she has that show, and it's all about educating each other to put the best products forward as an industry.
Right. And she and I also had the opportunity to interview perhaps one of the most well-known farmers of cannabis in the world. He, of course, is known as an actor comedian, Jim Belushi, this week. And that was a thrill for me because I've always been a big fan of his. How important is it to have these kinds of names embrace the cannabis movement in the United States and Canada and the world?
Yeah, it's cool, isn't it? The influencers. You have to have legit influencers for sure. Right. A lot of people will sell their name for the name, but it's important to have those types of organizations and people on board. The PBR, the Professional Bull Riders Association, that's an association. When you affiliate yourself with one individual, you do take a bit of a risk that individual might screw something up. But when you're affiliating yourselves with leagues and associations like the NFL and the NBA and those types of things, those are very impactful on the industry. Just look at what Canopy did back in the day when Constellation Brands came to the table, Corona, a large beverage company. So every little piece helps, and the Belushis and Snoop and those people who have put their name and reputations forward, God bless them. Hats off.
Hey, last question. I want to ask you about the emerging markets in Europe. What's going on there?
Well, look at very, very sad to see what's going on in Europe right now.
Well, needless to say, they're a little busy. They're not worried about cannabis. Although I got to tell you, Terry, what would be nice is if everybody would just put their weapons down and sit around and talk and maybe share a joint. That's not going to happen. I understand.
Yeah. Take it easy. Really take it easy.
Yeah.
UK, awesome. They've got a decent entry, both on the CBD side and the medical THC side. They've really taken the time to plan it. You see in Germany stepping up the medical market. It is continuing to grow. Australia continuing to grow, not as fast as we thought when we were back in the day 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago at Aurora. I thought everybody would be on pace with Canada. They're not. It's a slower grow, but the fact is it's growing. You've heard me say it before. Today is the smallest the cannabis industry will ever be, right? And tomorrow it'll be bigger once again. But Asia as well, outside of Europe, they're advancing. Thailand has agreed now to have THC. They're probably a year away. They were a signatory on the UN convention in '72, so they have to do the work. You take it out of the hands of the kids, you reduce the illegal, and you make the stuff safe. But they're competitive nations. Other nations will take that on. It's different in America, where the states are competitive, but it was more done from a righteous point of view than a business point of view. That this is a good medicine, and that's why you have these 50 different countries in America. But they'll become aligned, and I look forward to the day when we can cross state lines with high quality cannabis.
Yeah. Oh, like that isn't happening now. Wink, wink, right? I mean, come on, right? We all know it is, but let's make it official, right? Let's actually have a crop, maybe even a commodities market at some point, a future of cannabis.
Let's legalize it. Let's stop the bullshit. It's time.
Sure.
Once they make the decision, it's still going to take time, but let's make the time to use the time appropriately. It's time.
Absolutely. And speaking of time, it's Friday afternoon at 4:20-ish. It's usually when we take our break. Terry Booth, thank you so much for joining us again. You are welcome on this program at any time. And I'm going to I'll work with Sasha on that grower that you mentioned, to see if we might be able to get them on our Calling All Growers show, which I think you'll enjoy.
Good stuff. Yeah, he would contribute in a big way. He's a character and a half. Mr. Natural, Bob Luciani.
And I remember Mr. Natural, the cartoon. Okay, so that dates me at that. I understand. Terry Booth, thank you again. We're going to take our first break. As always, 4:20, we play Shanty from Jonathan Edwards. It's my thing, if you will, because when I was a kid, we were using back in the 70s, we heard Shanty, we had to go and partake, if you will. So now we're going to partake in a little music and a few messages from our sponsors and our supporters. And we say thank you again to Terry Booth from Audacious. Take care.
Thanks, Terry.
Sure. Thanks, Jimmy. Thanks, guys.
I really enjoy what I do. There's a couple different reasons for it. First of all, I've always been an accountant, and it's kind of a nerdy thing to say, but I do love accounting. And I also love helping companies. I love helping people build their companies, especially small to mid-sized startups. I've always been someone that's, in all my roles in industry, it's always been building teams, building companies, building departments. And to be honest, I love working for myself and owning my own company. So I love what I do every day.
Meet Caduceus Science, the alternative wellness company. You know CBD, but how about CBG, CBN? That's right, Caduceus Science produces a range of full-spectrum products, all lab-tested in small batches to maintain the highest quality of products. CaduceusScience.com. Hey, you want to grow your own plants? Check out Style Lighting's Grow Kit. It has everything you need to become an expert home grower and bring the power of the sun indoors. Style Lighting uses TCP's high-powered commercial LEDs that deliver twice the output in the market. The Grow Kit has a grow bag, a timer, chains to hang the light, and of course the best in the business lighting system by TCP. Check out stylelighting.shop for more information. Well, here we are again. Thank God it's another Friday edition of Green Rush Live. Hi, everybody. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. We have an interesting show today, like we always do. Unfortunately, I was supposed to have Deborah Borchardt as my co-host, but she got called away at the last minute late yesterday afternoon. So luckily, we have an awesome stand-in named Christopher Smith from the American Cannabis Report. So Christopher, thank you so much for stepping up and joining me as co-host today.
My pleasure. You know, anytime I get mentioned in the same sentence as Deb Borchardt, it's a good day for me. So everything is just fine. Thanks.
She really has carved herself out a beautiful reputation in this
No doubt.
space.
Well
Speaking
deserved.
of someone who has carved out a beautiful reputation in this space, Michael Correa. He, of course, is the Director of Government Relations for the NCIA, and that's a fancy long title for basically being a lobbyist in Washington, D.C. Michael, thank you so much for joining us here in 2022.
Hey, Jimmy, it's always great to be here on this rainy Friday in DC. I always enjoy it. Yes, this is the first time in 2022 I was able to be on the show. And hey, Chris, how's it going?
Great, Michael. Good to see you.
Hey,
Sorry about the rain. Sorry about the rain you guys are having. Real sorry.
I know with the sunny, being from Southern California, you know, I understand 300 days of sunny weather a year. Like,
I know. Terrible,
I can't even, my brain can't even wrap itself around that, being from New England my whole life. Okay. I mean, I haven't even had a chance to look outside the window, but it started to ice when I got in here around 9:30 this morning. And I have no idea if we have snow out there, if we have rain out there, if we have ice out there, because I'm focused on this show right now.
You're a workaholic, Jimmy, workaholic.
Or
sleeping in the studio again.
Some kind of a holic anyway. Michael, what's the latest? Because we know that the Safe Banking Act got a yay and got attached to another bill. And it was supposed to go to a floor vote perhaps today. Have you heard anything?
Oh, yeah. So the Safe Banking Act was attached to another bill related to trade policy and other economic policies called the America Competes Act. And it passed earlier today, I think by maybe 5 or 10 votes, mostly along party line votes, because it dealt with trade with China and other things. And our wonderful friend, Ed Perlmutter from Colorado, attached it. Ed's persistent. He will attach the Safe Banking Act to any piece of legislation that's moving through Congress. So technically, this is the 6th time safe banking has passed the House of Representatives in the last 3 years.
And is it the 6th time the charm? That doesn't even rhyme.
So here's the thing. You know, it's not a matter of it passes the House and then it's dead in the Senate. It passes the House, and a lot of these bills are sitting in the Senate. And so it's up to the Senate. I mean, they could just pick and choose. Let's pick which safe banking bill we want to have. And so this is going to be yet another vehicle for it to happen. And nothing is stopping them from just bringing up SAFE as SAFE was introduced in the Senate. Senator Jeff Merkley from Oregon has his own bill. Nothing is stopping them from bringing up any bills around SAFE. So to me, you know, it's great. We love Ed. It's attached to another House bill, but at the same time, all the actions in the Senate, and until the Senate does something, it's going to be a broken record.
All right, well, I got to ask, Senate has are they actually working the Senate? Because nothing's getting done, Michael. It's really frustrating right now to be an American citizen and know that every single progressive piece of legislation dies in the Senate.
Well, you know, as a former House staffer for 15 years, we always used to say that the Senate is where our bills went to go die. And so it's not something that's ever different from the history of why it was set up. It's just a little more. Now we have the information, we have the news, it's right in front of us. It's obvious they can't function. And you sort of see that the Democrats can't even agree on 50 votes on anything, let alone getting 60 votes or let alone working. So it is a little frustrating, especially on the cannabis front.
I know Christopher has prepared a few questions for you, so I'm going to kind of throw it right over to him and let him take it for a few minutes. Go ahead, Christopher.
You know, Michael, we were just talking about the idea that it's sort of a blue versus red, and where the bill is stuck now in the Senate seems to be stuck on party lines. And one thing I would love to hear you talk about, just to really sort of express to the audience, is how cannabis and the industry and the values and the benefits that cannabis has brought to states all across the country, how those values are actually consistent with conservative values, and how we can push this forward and get it out of this sort of party debate and really talk about the values of cannabis to both sides.
Well, one, that was one of the reasons why I joined NCIA and was brought in 9 years ago, was for my background on the Hill. And for someone who worked in Republican politics for 20 plus years, what is their rhetoric? What do they talk about? They talk about freedom. They talk about liberty. They talk about, states' rights, letting the states determine their policy. What better issue than can you talk about than cannabis? That gets down to liberty, that gets down to freedom, that gets down to the states wanting to determine their own policy on cannabis. Ooh, wait, hold on. That's the one time Republicans don't believe in liberty, freedom, or states' rights. And it's very frustrating because that's one issue that you mentioned that completely aligns with their philosophies. And
right. That's what I think. Yeah.
As you've seen throughout the years, in the past few years, this is the most popular issue in any state. When this was in Florida on medical years ago, it was 70+%. It was the highest vote getter of any state ballot initiative or anyone running for statewide office in Florida. When Obama was on the ballot in 2012 in Colorado, it was more popular than Obama. In any state, in California, it was the leading vote getter. So the voters are well out in front of the policymakers in DC, but it doesn't run, historically, it ran in blue states, but you're seeing this in red states. You are seeing states around the union, southern states. The polling is very similar when you break down Democrats versus Republicans. This tends to be more of older voters versus younger voters, and older voters are holding on to those prohibitionist policies because they all grew up in a time where it was bad, whereas younger people, conservative or Democrat, have seen Colorado. I mean, Colorado's going on year 8 or 9 in legalization. And the world, it was like, oh, the world's going to end. The wheels are going to fall off. It didn't. Colorado has had a booming economy. Their tourism is great. Their budget's great. So there's nothing from a policy issue that's shown that this shouldn't be accepted. It's just along the lines of getting, and here's one big bit of advice. Republicans, they want to get elected and they go to the sugar daddies of funders. And one of the biggest sugar daddies on the right was Sheldon Adelson out of Nevada. And he made billions of dollars in casino gambling. And he and his wife, he passed away, but he and his wife basically ran a drug reform or a drug clinic to help kids with abuses. And they are totally anti-drugs. Well, if he's funding and that family is funding hundreds of millions of dollars on the Republican side, it's very hard for a future Republican to want to make some money and go to them and work up the party. And until you get something that can counter that, it's really hard because, future Republicans are going to be looking at that and towing the line. And it's going to take a bit. The voters are coming around, the policymakers are coming around, but it's going to take a little bit before it's on par with what Democrats and the party goes through.
Sure. Yeah, that's got to be a daily thing. And it seems to be very true on the state level. Every time we read about a state like Wisconsin is just in the news, for example, right? Democrats push forward legalization, Republicans stop it. And I did a story recently sort of shooting down the Republicans saying, look at all you're missing for your state. Yeah. Next neighboring states, Illinois, Michigan, 16,000 jobs, 18,000 jobs. Illinois, $500 million worth of tax revenue now into the state, new tax revenue. So they don't have to tax their farmers. They don't have to tax their industry. They have new money, but they're not going for it. So this is an issue here.
I totally agree with you. I'll tell you a story. So I was in Montana in the summer, and I flew in and out of Spokane, Washington, which is on the eastern side. And there's a dispensary right on the border with Idaho. And I stopped by, and there were probably 40 cars in the parking lot. And I think 36 of them had Idaho license plates. And we know Idaho is probably the only state in the union that has doing nothing on cannabis. But even their constituents, like Idaho is just missing out from a tax base that they're giving to Washington State and other states because they don't want to admit, and they don't want to admit that they consume cannabis, which consumers have been consuming cannabis for, decades. They've just been doing it hidden. And now you can bring it out. And this is an opportunity. You see in Mississippi, the state legislature has been working. You saw in South Dakota, these red states are passing these because the voters want it. And I don't think it's a partisan issue. I don't want to make it a partisan issue, but I want victories, and I want victories. And until people wise up, it's going to be the Democrats are going to be leading on this and are going to be benefiting. And Republicans need to come around and embrace this because I think that they can neutralize the issue and go fight your wars on other wedge issues, like neutralize the cannabis issue.
You know, I've said before that I think that one of the big mistakes that Donald Trump made on domestic policy is not legalizing cannabis. If he had done that, it would have shaken the race up in an unbelievable way. And he would have had such an advantage by being so bold. I mean, it would have been right on brand. It was bold. It was unexpected. It was, you know, a breakthrough. It could have been, right? It was right there for him, and he didn't take it.
So, you know, I'm a history buff and political history buff. We all know it was that anti-communist Richard Nixon that opened up trade with China. Yep. And why? Because he could. I totally agree with you. It was an opportunity for Trump to do something outside of what the norm was and to change the narrative. And he could have had that protection. Whereas Obama, I don't think could have legalized cannabis because he would have gotten crucified. Whereas a person like Trump on the right could have said, this is such a big issue, this transcends the party, and I'm going to take a big, gigantic, historic step. And it definitely, I had thoughts that maybe, you know, in 2018 or 19 or 20, he would do something like that. It never materialized, but you know, sometimes politicians aren't as bold as I would like them to be. And that was that was an example, but I totally agree with you.
I don't think they're bold at all. I think they're fence, you know,
they're risk averse. They're risk averse, Jimmy.
Right. Exactly right. Exactly right. I just want to give a comment. We just got one of the nicest comments in our chat room that I think we've ever had from Renegade Knight. And basically he said, well, he loves our hard work and insight. You sound more legit than CNN or any news operation out there. That's the first time we've been compared to CNN. I'll tell you that. And they're leaderless right now.
I thought for a minute he was going to say, what a wonderful paint job my wife just did in the office. She loves the blue, but hey, I'll take the comparison to CNN.
Yeah, that was very nice. And he said, what we really need to do is get weed in the hands of our governor, our senators, and have them chill out. Yeah. Actually, you know, it's funny, Michael, one of the things, and I was talking about this earlier to somebody today, you know, we both have heard, all of us have heard, cannabis has saved my life. Cannabis has changed my life. Are there any senators that have any family members that have had a good experience with cannabis as a strong medicine? Because sometimes that changes even the most hardcore prohibitionist.
No, I agree. And, you know, NCIA just recently concluded our virtual lobby days. Normally we would do our in-person lobby days in DC. Maybe
I was there once.
You were there in May years ago. We haven't done it because the Capitol closed because we're doing virtual. And one of the things I like to do is tell stories, have people tell stories that are relatable. Right. And it's not a theoretical, it's someone, because we all have kids, we all have siblings, we all have parents and grandparents that maybe have cancer or PTSD or some issue that they're benefiting from. And it's one of these things where if there's a story and there's a connection where the light bulb goes off and you're like, oh, wow, you benefit from cannabis. And it takes it away from the us versus them narrative that had been so true for like the 80s and many decades that normal people don't consume cannabis. I've talked to a lot of people, politicians, and they will tell personal stories of something they witnessed, a family that came in, or someone, a relative, or even relatives who are in the industry. And so it is something that I think makes it more relatable for a lot of these politicians, and it destigmatizes it and makes it easier.
Yeah. Roger Stone, you know, Trump advisor, you know, and sort of general scoundrel, but came out pro cannabis in the early days. And I thought that was really remarkable. But like you, I knew there must be a family connection. He admitted that, actually. He said that was why a family member had cancer and had survived well and, you know, lived much longer and was comfortable. And he saw it with his own eyes. And he said, That's it. It's a good decision. And he went for it. It was completely against the party line. It was completely against, Jeff Sessions. It was against all that. And he said, I believe, I've seen it. I believe it. And I thought that could have been a breakthrough. We see John Boehner join in. We see William Weld join in. We see people like that. And we go, come on, more. Bring them over.
And that's the thing. It's going to take some time, and it's going to take those personal stories of, I look at, I'll give you an example of veterans. You're a veteran who served your country, and maybe you were injured permanently or mentally or physically. And the fact that the VA doesn't even think twice of addicting you to every known opioid, but hello, cannabis that could deal with pain, that could deal with mental issues. No, we won't even have that discussion. And the fact that you see people suffering, and that's the worst thing, is just seeing anyone suffer. And it really frustrates me that there's politicians out there that want to get between a person and their doctor, or a family member and their doctor. Like, that should just be between those two. And if one decides that plant-based medicine is the way to go, who should stop them? And it's really frustrating that there tends to be these prohibitionist politicians who are stopping them, which is sad. But hey, that's why they pay me, and why I'm fighting is to change these rules.
Oh,
that's great.
We certainly appreciate that. Another reason that people get turned on to or get exposed to cannabis, unfortunately, is when it is a end of life issue, palliative care or hospice care. It almost seems to be like the last resort. If you can't get morphine, you can get some weed. And again, we see this a lot, but what are we going to do about that? Because unless these senators end up in hospice or palliative care, I don't think they're ever going to try this or even take the time to learn about it.
Yeah. And I like to tell the story. I'm not old enough to remember alcohol prohibition, but think about it, 80, 90 years ago,
right?
A politician sipping wine or drinking a beer at a reception would have been illegal during that time, but no one even thinks twice. Now, every politician goes to a reception, unless they're a teetotaler, throws back a drink or something. And the fact that cannabis could be viewed the same way, why would it be different? Now, I would love, Jimmy, to have my first politician come out. I think there was one recently. Maybe it was Nancy Mace that said she dealt.
Yeah, it was Nancy Mace.
Who used it to deal with some stresses and traumas in her life.
She was assaulted as a teenager.
We need more politicians coming out to say they personally used it, and not have to worry about the blowback or the stigma for whatever reason.
Yeah. Well, we love the image of the gentleman in Louisiana who's running for Senate, who decided to use the opportunity to smoke a joint on camera.
I want to get that guy to speak at our next conference. I'm definitely intrigued. The fact that he did that, I think, is wonderful.
It was great. It led our news. It went viral. Even George Jage said he would vote for this guy if he lived in Louisiana.
We all got to send him some money. We all got to send him some money.
And can I talk about money and politics for a second here? And sure. I think people know that I'm on. You could probably guess which political party that I'm aligned with. Okay, but I'm not happy with it, and I'm going to explain why. Every day in my email box, I'm getting asked for money, $3, $10, $15, whatever it is. And I'm like, the Democrats seem to really embrace the dollar bill because all they want to do is spend it, it seems. That being said, I didn't give any of that money because I don't believe in giving money to politicians. I just don't. I think there are enough people out there. I think money corrupts the politicians. I think money destroys our values as a democracy. That's my opinion, of course. And but I thought I would at least be fair and taking a shot at the party because leave me alone. I mean, I know how to unsubscribe too, guys. Don't worry. But still, it is very frustrating, and you see it. I see it on a daily basis when I come in and I look at my emails and have to get rid of them all. So you
should try to be a lobbyist that everyone has your email list. I have 500 emails every day begging for money. So I know what it is. And, you can have your thoughts like you do on money in politics. It's there. It hasn't gone away. The Supreme Court has said it's legal. I don't think it's going away. And until some major change happens, it is what it is. And someone's giving them money, and those politicians are listening to those people. And what I've tried to do in the cannabis industry is to get our industry people more savvy when it comes to politics and how politics works. And money is not an end all be all. You don't dangle money in front of someone and then they change their opinion. But politicians need campaigns. They need campaign staff. They need advertisement. They need to do this. Those cost money. So for people to get elected and to be in these positions of power to affect change and do something, it's costly. And I want people, we look at our great friend like Ed Perlmutter, if he wasn't there, who would be fighting for us? And they're there. And that's where people should be embracing. You mentioned the guy in Louisiana. Okay. I mean, imagine if millions of people started giving him money and his coffers just blew up of the change he could do. So I'm not pessimistic on money. I mean, there's too much money from too few people, right? But at the same time, it's an opportunity for all of us to say, we really like this person. I'll use AOC as an example. Here she was working as a waitress,
bartender,
working as a waitress in a bar, or something like that. And 4 years later, she's raking in millions of dollars because people assume, like what she's selling is affecting change. And that's I guess money is a way to show your excitement, on something like that. And
I guess so. Hey, and lastly, we're past the 420 bewitching hour on Friday. So if you're out there, enjoy. But I do want to ask one more question. There are rumors now, there's ripplings that the Chuck Schumer bill may actually get introduced in 2022. What are you hearing about that?
So we just talked with because we just concluded our lobby days this week. We talked with a lot of these Senate offices, and basically the main writers of this bill were in the Senate Finance Committee, and in the fall they spent because Chairman Wyden or Senator Ron Wyden from Oregon. Yep. Chairman, they're the main tax writers and did a lot of this writing. They were spending most of their fall on the Build Back Better program. And that was something that consumed a lot of the oxygen in DC with congressional staff. Their hope was that would have been passed in November or December, and then they could pivot to getting back to this comprehensive reform bill and then work through all the comments and details and then make an introduction. That, has been delayed. And so they are delayed. They had always hinted at dropping it maybe in the springtime.
Right.
And so I'm still holding them to springtime. We know Chuck Schumer loves media. And so why not around 420? So, I'm holding out hope, fingers crossed that they're going to get some people to drop it around April or something. But there isn't some secret plan to hold it. It's just a matter of bandwidth that their energy was on other issues in Congress. And they're getting around to it. And they did say when they drop it, they want to have a very thorough discussion on it. And that to me leads to hearings. And so there's an opportunity we're pushing, having maybe some hearings in the Senate in the later spring or summer to talk about this issue. Because trust me, I want them to drop this bill as soon as possible so we can see what's in it and what are the tax rates and what does the regulatory structure look like so we can either support it or oppose it or bring our questions up, because we gave 40 pages of responses to their questions. And NCIA, we want to be a thorough thought leader on some of these things and do what's right for the industry and be good lobbyists and advocates.
Well, there you go. And again, Michael, I appreciate your hard work in the trenches down there in DC. And I appreciate your commitment to our show, coming on and bringing us up to date on what's going on down there. I will say that the rest of this show, we're going to be turning over to women in the cannabis media space. So, and Christopher and I hope we'll just kind of sit back and let the women talk about what they have to face in the media. So I appreciate you coming on. I thank you again. We're going to take our 420 break a little late this afternoon, but we will be back on the other side after Jonathan Edwards sings one of my favorite songs, Shanty, Don't Go Away. Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
Difference is building a solution for that individual. Not just a custom, here's a box, here's a video, here's how you make your VMS. We custom design and custom build every situation for exactly what the customer needs. And we keep the cost low. We have multiple tiers, as far as what you're looking at on the cost side of things. If you want a one-time, where you just pay one initial cost, we have that. If you want to maintain your system and have the highest protection and highest capabilities and highest upgrades at all times, we have different plans for you. But we scale it so it's scalable and affordable 100%.
Cannabis Media programming is available live and on demand on our Facebook page at Pro Canna Media, on Instagram at Pro Cannabis Media, on LinkedIn also at Pro Cannabis Media, on YouTube and YouTube Live on Pro Cannabis Media, Twitter at Pro Canna Media, and on twitch.tv/Pro Cannabis Media. So like, share, and subscribe to all of our content, newsletters, and shows live or on demand.
We are Pro Cannabis Media. We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Pro Cannabis Media programming and PCM TV is supported by Revolutionary Clinics, Massachusetts' #1 medical dispensary where the patient comes first, and by Salient Systems for Video Surveillance. You've got regulations, Salient has solutions for your security needs. And by Accounting Buds, your #1 CPA specialist for the cannabis industry.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Weed Talk News. I'm Elena Pinto reporting for Pro Cannabis Media. In our top story this week, Massachusetts-based MSO Curaleaf is clearing up any confusion about its ties to Russia, or lack thereof, amid the ongoing conflict with Ukraine. So this week, Curaleaf posted a statement to its investors clarifying that its executive chairman and largest investor, Boris Jordan, is an American citizen, clarifying that he had only done previous business overseas in Russia and Europe. It's a stark example of how much more integrated cannabis companies are becoming in the modern world. Back in the US, banks are seeing green when it comes to cannabis. The Safe Banking Act, which would protect financial institutions who work with state legal cannabis companies, is still stalled up on Capitol Hill. Democrats say they'd rather see comprehensive reform passed first, but Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says of late, he's more open to passing banking legislation if it includes certain equity provisions. But in the meantime, it seems like banks are getting more comfortable with weed anyway. As of September 2021, there were 755 banks and credit unions that had filed requisite reports saying they were actively serving cannabis clients, an increase of nearly 50 from the previous quarter. So perhaps it's going to show that despite current federal law, more banks are willing to put their money where their mouth is and try to help legal cannabis flourish. The battle for legal bud grows on a state level too, and there's good news in Minnesota. Medical patients there can finally buy cannabis in its purest form, dry THC flower, a purchase that couldn't be legally made before this week. So congrats to the land of 10,000 lakes. But over in South Dakota, it's a smoke out, literally. That's what they call the legislative maneuver that occurred this week that has essentially, once again, stalled efforts to legalize in the state. South Dakota Senate narrowly approved a legalization bill last week, But the House State Affairs Committee defeated it by voting to move the legislation to the 41st day of the session. That's one day after the session ends, thereby preventing it from moving forward anytime soon. And unfortunately, there's a similar story happening in Delaware. 5 years ago, the state seemed poised to be one of the first to allow adult use cannabis, but it's been difficult to pass given resistance from the governor. The Delaware lawmakers say they are determined to legalize, drafting and discussing a third version of the bill, which some politicians think will have more support than years past. But there is progress in the Northeast. This week, Vermont voters greatly expanded the number of towns where retail sales of cannabis will be permitted to anyone 21 and older. While several smaller towns said no, the statewide vote greatly reduced the distances between towns that have decided to allow cannabis retail in their future. And Jessie Lynn Dolan has more in this week's Vermont Report.
I'm Jessie Lynn Dolan from Nurse Grown Organics and Vermont Cannabis Nurses, and this is the Weed Talk News Vermont Report. Ceres Med, formerly Champlain Valley Dispensary, now owned by international MSO Slang, has fired several of their marketing department employees, with one, if not more, employees quitting. Town Meeting Day was a landmark event for cannabis in Vermont, as over 30 towns voted March 2nd to allow retail sales in their community, with dozens voting yes and only 8 voting no. Overall, 36,000 voters favored retail cannabis, with over 18,000 disapproving. Inspired by Meals for Relatives COVID-19 Rapid City Community Response, Magic Man Global Indigenous Fund held a raffle giveaway to help address food sustainability and inequity issues in Indigenous communities. Mr. Z Craft Cannabis teamed up with Vermont Normal and a host of local canna businesses for a Black History Month event that raised $300 for a cannabis equity fund. That's the Vermont Report. For Weed Talk News, I'm Vermont's cannabis nurse, Jessie Lynn Dolan.
Pennsylvania could be inching closer to adult use cannabis. This week, a key state Senate committee held the second of 3 hearings it is scheduled on legalization, as the panel's chairman actively drafts a reform bill. The committee's biggest concerns seem to be centered around whether creating a regulated market would be sufficient to eliminate illicit sales, how police would be affected, and the impact on impaired driving. Claudia Post has much more in this week's Pennsylvania Report.
I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express, and I'm here in the Keystone State, Pennsylvania, reporting for Weed Talk News. A Spotlight PA investigation has found some cannabis companies are using incomplete or misleading claims to promote marijuana as a treatment for opioid addiction. 60 websites were found to be cherry-picking and misrepresenting parts of the studies, making broad claims without citing any specific research, and nor did they provide total information about what it takes to qualify for the state's medical program. So incomplete information, misleading from these folks. Health policy experts worry that the messages could steer patients away from medical treatments. Obviously, more government oversight is needed. PA senators held their second hearing in a month on the potential legalization of recreational marijuana. PA medical sellers offered advice to the Senate. I wonder if they are self-serving, do you think? Recommendations were keep taxes low, allow current medical marijuana companies to start selling recreational marijuana first, and set a firm deadline for the law to go into effect. Interesting who you called to testify. On March 1st, the House Democratic Policy Committee examined the impacts of cannabis criminalization in Pennsylvania. They discussed the following: criminalization and how it destroys families, diversity disparities, and why PA legislators must consider legalizing adult use, and extremely important, none of this would be possible unless there was mass expungement. Well, that's a wrap from Pennsylvania. I'm Claudia Post from Scarlet Express, and I'll be back next week to tell you what's hot and what's not in Pennsylvania. So from We Talk News, have a fabulous week.
Rhode Island could be on its way to fully legal weed as well. This week, co-sponsors in the state's House and Senate formally introduced a pair of identical bills to legalize, regulate, and tax cannabis for adults 21 and older in Rhode Island. The legislation would allow adults to possess and purchase up to 1 ounce of cannabis, keep up to 10 ounces at home, and would allow people to cultivate up to 3 cannabis plants in their own residence. And in New York, the governor is proposing that the state set aside $200 million for social equity in the industry. The public-private fund would provide aid to eligible social equity applicants, and funds will be drawn from licensing fee revenue as well as bring in support from private investors. Sticking with the East Coast, let's check in with Ron Marshalsea for this week's Massachusetts Report.
I'm Ron Marshalsea with the Massachusetts Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. U.S. cannabis company Curaleaf has told investors that it is not subject to any sanctions against Russia, although it has some ties to the country. Curaleaf's founder Boris Johnson is a U.S. citizen born in Long Island and owns about 22% of the company's stock, as well as businesses in the U.S., Europe, and Russia. Curaleaf said in a message on their website, "These are rumors and misinformation spread during turbulent times. The speculation on social media that the company and its major shareholders and executives will somehow be subject to any U.S. government economic sanctions now or in the future is incorrect." The company ended their message saying how U.S. citizens, whether they hold other passports or not, cannot be subject to U.S. economic sanctions. Officials announced on Wednesday that an explosion at a mill building in Massachusetts last month was caused by a man who was trying to extract hash oil from marijuana. Emergency crews responded to a fire and explosion in Pittsfield, where they found a man suffering from life-threatening injuries, several melted plastic containers, and a large number of marijuana plants. This was according to the Pittsfield Police and Fire Chief, as well as the State Fire Marshal. They added this is why extraction processes using flammable gases and liquids need safety regulations. The victim's condition, as well as if he will be facing charges, are still unknown. And finally, Tilt Holdings Incorporated will be launching adult-use cannabis delivery from its Commonwealth Alternative Care Dispensary in Taunton. The delivery service is made available through a partnership with Braxton Pistols, a local woman-owned and veteran-managed social equity cannabis delivery operator. Beginning March 2nd, Braxton Pistols will deliver cannabis products from CAC Taunton to adult-use consumers in communities within a 25-mile radius, including New Bedford, Plymouth, and Wareham. That's this week's Massachusetts Cannabis Report. For Weed Talk News, I'm Ron Marshalsea.
Bay State Cannabis Report is supported by Holyoke Cannabis, Holyoke's finest cannabis recreational experience.
The Show Me State is showing to be a leader in cannabis progress. This week, Missouri Republican Dottie Bailey put forth a resolution that condemns the decision by international sports associations to ban U.S. sprinter Sha'Carri Richardson from participating in last year's Olympics after testing positive for cannabis. It also specifically calls for President Biden to end marijuana prohibition and support American athletes. Brandon Jones has more from the Show Me State in this week's Missouri Report.
Hey everybody, Brandon Jones again from Distribution Made with the Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. And yes, I'm very excited that Missouri is again at the front of the legislation here. I was very upset to see last year, obviously, that Sha'Carri Richardson wasn't allowed to perform in the Olympics. She was banned. It was just such a horrible thing to see that it's not a performance-enhancing drug, as we all know here. So I'm very excited that Missouri is going to see if we can do something about that. As a former athlete, I've seen a lot of athletes that have used marijuana and cannabis just to help them relax, to deal with the muscle pain and all the different things that they've gone through being an athlete. So I'm very happy to see that this is getting going. My first report today comes out of Riverfront Times. If you can believe it, 135-pound gummy, world breaking, was made here in Missouri. So it was actually done by Good Day Farms, at a Little Rock, Arkansas-based company, but they built the gummy and have it here in Missouri. The problem is nobody can actually take it off the premises because it's 116,000 milligrams of THC. So that was over anybody's personal limit as soon as you take it off the premises. So they're trying to figure out some way to at least let people come in and see it. But yeah, it's a 135-pound sour apple gummy. by Good Day Farms. Pretty crazy. My second story isn't actually out of a publication. Just know that obviously with April coming up, there's lots of events around that. And here in Missouri is trying to catch up and get in the event calendar as well here too. But a lot of the sponsors and a lot of the event coordinators are having issues because they can't actually advertise that this is a cannabis event. So they're doing the little workarounds like we all do on social media and using plant-friendly or 420 friendly. But obviously that's just going to affect the gates and how many people can come and just get the education out there. So again, I just want to see that if we can actually advertise correctly, and let's not stigmatize cannabis. Let's just let everybody get educated and get some more access to it. So again, I'm Brandon Jones from Distribution Manager for the Missouri Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great week.
Back in the U.S., a big shakeup in the market. Southern California-based MSO MedMen says it's leaving the state of Florida altogether, and it plans to sell all its assets to Florida-based Green Century Holdings for a whopping $83 million. Deborah Borchardt has more in this week's Green Market Report.
This is the business update for Weed Talk News from the Green Market Report. We had a lot of earnings this week, so we're just going to hit a couple of them for you here. Green Thumb Industries, or GTI, had the best quarter out of all the companies this week. They had revenues of $243 million in the fourth quarter, but for the full year, it was a staggering $893 million. Kronos Group didn't fare as well. That company did have revenues for the full year of $74 million, but they had an operating loss of $560 million. And then they also had a net loss of $389 million for the full year. Now, Tilray Brands said that they were going to basically bail out Hexo Corp. They are buying their debt for $211 million. That company had said in December that they were struggling to pay that debt, so they can thank Tilray for helping them out. And that's it for this week. I'm Deborah Borchardt for the Green Market Report for Weed Talk News.
Also in Florida, the state's health department has awarded BioTrack as the sole software provider for the state's medical cannabis track and trace system. Agency negotiators voted unanimously to award BioTrack the contract, which will not only monitor the movement of marijuana inventory throughout the state, but also assist in product recalls. Heather Allman has more from Florida this week.
It's time for the Florida Report from Weed Talk News, and I'm Heather Allman from Cannabis Law Report. This week, MedMen Enterprises announced plans to sell all of their Florida assets for $83 million. The cash deal includes the sale of MedMen's cultivation operations, their inventory, 7 retail dispensaries, and most importantly, their coveted Florida operating license, one of only 22 in the state. The Fort Lauderdale buyer, Green Century Holdings, is associated with cannabis entrepreneur Brady Cobb. And if you remember, Brady Cobb is the founder and former CEO of One Plant Florida, who was acquired by Cresco Labs in January of last year. While the national retailer MedMen maintains a strong presence in 5 other states, they did not specify why they are exiting the Florida market. From the look of their parking lot, however, I would say it might be sales related, but with MedMen, you never know. Recently, Hernando County School Board member Jimmy Lodato called for the district to rethink its current cannabis use policy, claiming that retaining employees who are using marijuana for medical reasons is in the district's best interest. Lodato is asking that the district differentiate between recreational and medical cannabis, but school districts worry that policy changes allowing any cannabis use could put their federal funding in jeopardy. And while Lodato believes that money should not be the deciding factor when district employees need medical help, the Hernando County School Board has taken no action regarding its policy pertaining to employee cannabis use, nor is it planning any future action at this time. On Monday, the state of Florida Department of Health unanimously voted to choose BioTrack as the sole track and trace system for the state's medical cannabis program. Florida law requires that all licensed medical cannabis establishments participate in the tracking system and log the movement of cannabis from plant to patient. Without any additional cost to Florida businesses, the state will use BioTrack to monitor the medical use cannabis market, to provide real-time inventory availability, and prevent the unlawful diversion of medical products to the black market, or so they hope. Currently used by 38 other states and 10 countries, the BioTrack system also helps easily recall cannabis plants that have been tampered with or deemed unsafe. That's a wrap for the We Talk News Florida Report. I'm Heather Allman from Cannabis Law Report.
The cannabis-rich state of California has been facing a back-and-forth tax battle that's had many companies in a chokehold. Since state lawmakers have been slow to lower cannabis taxes, local governments are now scrambling to roll back taxes and grant relief to cannabis businesses. Those in the Golden State say a historic drop on wholesale prices is finally, only just now, beginning to rebound. Christopher Smith has much more in this week's California Report.
Greetings from the left coast. California Roundup for Weed Talk News. He's got 1 degree from Stanford and 1 from Harvard, but now he's out of a job working for aging Senator Dianne Feinstein. Jamarcus Purley was fired for various infractions, but to hear him tell it, being black in the senator's office was an impossible mission. The senator cares more about her dog than black people, Purley said in a staff meeting, which didn't go over very well, as one can imagine. What's Purley's famous for this week is a YouTube video that he posted while smoking a blunt in Feinstein's office after hours, which is amusing in a goofy sort of way, if you want to watch it. Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein is one of the oldest people on the planet and represents a state with far and away the largest cannabis industry and far and away the most cannabis jobs in the U.S. Senator Feinstein's been one of the most notorious anti-drug crusaders and even rejected Prop 64 that legalized cannabis here in California in 2016. Feinstein is no friend of our industry. The traffic is called the Orange Crush. The county line is called the Orange Curtain. And apparently the county of 3.2 million residents is also a cannabis desert, according to Marijuana Moment. Yes, I'm talking about Orange County. It's the 3rd largest county in California, even though it has more people than 21 states have. It's the home of beaches, Disneyland, professional teams, a whole lot of Republican fundraisers coming soon. But even though the majority voted in favor of Prop 64 in 2016, it still has only 117 cannabis businesses. By contrast, LA, San Francisco, Alameda, and Humboldt counties have thousands, which is apparently where Orange County shops for weed. Now, one of the greatest dispensaries in downtown LA was raided yesterday. That's right, a legal licensed dispensary was raided in broad daylight. Forget this, unpaid taxes. To be clear, Jungle Boys paid $18 million in taxes last year. So that should tell you how successful that shop is. And it had one outstanding bill, which it couldn't be paid during COVID time when the tax office was closed. That bill was for $66,000. The company had a hearing date scheduled with the tax collection office. In other words, everything was letter of the law, but Johnny Law busted the doors in anyway yesterday, guns drawn, and stole, you heard me, stole $174,000 from Jungle Boys, including the cash in the tip jars. Have you ever heard of a SWAT team storming a legal business over a tax bill? Now what's that song from Compton? That's not coming to me. Anyway, I'm Christopher Smith, publisher of the American Cannabis Report, sharing California's Feinstein funnies, pearl-clutching phonies, fake fees, and F the police from Weed Talk News.
Cannabis dispensary owners and employees in Washington state are calling for harsher punishment for those who commit armed robbery against shops. A new bill proposes increasing the standard sentence by 12 months for those found guilty of robbing a dispensary. The legislation is currently awaiting a House floor vote after passing through the Senate. Josh Kincaid has a closer look at what's happening in Washington state this week.
I'm Josh Kincaid from the Talking Hedge with the Washington State Cannabis Report for Weed Talk News. A judge in Washington state ruled that a retail marijuana company violated state law by using a cannabis delivery service. Licensed retail stores that either deliver cannabis themselves or use a third-party app transport service are in violation of several state regulations, according to the Liquor and Cannabis Board. Commercial cannabis delivery is not specifically outlawed in Washington, but cannabis delivery itself isn't outright prohibited. In 2017, the governor signed into law allowing friends to share or gift cannabis to one another in select amounts. But regulators in Washington state warn that cannabis companies can't have home delivery options claiming to be sharing with friends. So a county superior court found recently that by using this delivery service that a cannabis retailer violated the state law by inviting that transport company to enter its stores. According to the Liquor and Cannabis Board, they said state law makes it clear that marijuana delivery is prohibited for commercial purposes. So with that, next week you guys are going to find out about Washington State's out-of-state license ownership rules. But we're going to have to roll up this Washington State Cannabis Report. I'm Josh Kincaid from the Talking Hedge, reporting for Weed Talk News. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't, and I'm out.
In Michigan, there's good news for customers, but maybe not so good news for growers. Michigan's retail cannabis prices hit an all-time low in January. State records show that an oversaturation of supply is driving down prices so much that customers are buying it at record rates. Right now, the average price for a gram of bud is less than $5. So let's check in with Michigan Normal Executive Director, Rick Thompson. Rick.
This is the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News. Let's begin. There's been extensive coverage in mainstream media of the falling price of cannabis in Michigan this past week. January of 2022 saw the lowest retail sale price for an ounce of cannabis flower at $152 per ounce, lowest in the regulated market's history. Now, a falling price structure makes for an uncertain future for Michigan's poorly or moderately capitalized cannabis businesses. And those are the smaller mom and pop stores we all love so much. Bridge Magazine reports that ounces in Kalamazoo are selling for $50 each, and grams in some store are priced at $5 each, which is less than half of the national average price. Now, who's the culprit here? The excessive number of stacked cultivation licenses here in Michigan. One facility in Southwest Michigan was recently awarded 40 stacked Class C licenses. Now, that one single facility has more licenses than most of Michigan's biggest cannabis cultivators have across the entire state. When will it end? The number of cultivation licenses issued in Michigan tripled within a 6-month period in 2021, and all that cannabis is going to hit the market very soon now. The woe will only worsen for cannabis companies floating on the edge of solvency, and 2022 will be the year of great reckoning in Michigan's cannabis industry. Oh, it's getting very contentious over in Royal Oak, a Detroit suburb. Now, that's over cannabis licensing. 2 new companies have been given approval to advance into the first stage of business license consideration, and 2 of the state's biggest cannabis companies are using the courts to bully city leaders into halting the process. Attitude Wellness, which is Loom, and Quality Roots have filed suit against the city, alleging violations of the Open Meetings Act and various other things. The suit also attacks the 2 smaller companies for hiring a former mayor and a former city commissioner in Jim Razor to represent them in dealings with the city. Now, Jim Razor is my former attorney, and I can tell you he's good, but he isn't on council anymore. A decision on the legal request to force Royal Oak to pause their cannabis licensing program is expected today from Oakland County Judge Ray Lee Chabot. House Bill 5877 was introduced in Michigan's legislature this week, and it proposes to completely remove cannabis from Michigan's list of controlled substances. Currently, cannabis is on both Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 of the state's list of banned and harmful drugs, despite the 13-year-old medical marijuana program we have and the 4-year-old adult use cannabis law. The bill literally strikes out cannabis from Schedule 1 and 2 of that state controlled substances list. Each individual state has their own list of controlled substances, and those lists often vary from the federal list of the same name. Now, the bill sponsor is Representative Yusuf Rabi, and it carries 8 co-sponsors. A companion bill, which will cover more of the legal fixes necessary to make this change work, is expected to be introduced soon. This bill must travel through the dreaded Regulatory Reform Committee, and it may not be granted a hearing in this legislative session. Final story. When is a C grade good enough? Really, never. But that seems to be where Michigan is stuck when it comes to the annual report card for state medical cannabis programs as rated by the National Organization of Americans for Safe Access. Now, to be fair, no A grades were issued. Only 1 B was given to Maine, 1 B minus given to Illinois. California and Colorado received C plus grades, but the Great Lakes state did poorly on our midterm test by continuing to harass caregivers and threatened to reduce personal cultivation privileges, according to ASA. They also advised forming discount options for patients experiencing financial hardship and to enable housing and employment protections for ill individuals. And that's it for the Michigan Report with Rick Thompson on Weed Talk News.
And finally, a story out of Canada that might sound too stoned to be true. Mounties pulled over a trucker for speeding on the highway, and when they decided to search the truck, they found 440 cannabis plants. That's just 434 more than Canada allows you to have. And as you can imagine, that driver now faces a number of charges. So the next time you're transporting cannabis, make sure the number of plants and your speed is under the legal limit. Seems like a no-brainer, but sometimes stoners need a friendly reminder as well. And here's another reminder. It's a whole new world of weed out there, so use it wisely. That's all for this week in Weed Talk News. I'm Elena Pinto for Pro Cannabis Media.
Weed Talk and In the Weeds are two productions of Pro Cannabis Media supported by Revolutionary Clinics, one of the top medical cannabis dispensaries in the Massachusetts area, now with 3 locations in Greater Boston, 2 in Cambridge and 1 on Broadway in Somerville. Rev Clinics has a patient-first mission. They will customize your needs as a medical patient with the proper titration and combination of strains, flavors, and products. Rev Clinics, where the patient comes first.
Difference is building a solution for that individual. Not just a custom, here's a box, here's a video, here's how you make your VMS. We custom design and custom build every situation for exactly what the customer needs. And we keep the costs low. We have multiple tiers, as far as what you're looking at on the cost side of things. If you want a one-time, where you just pay one initial cost, we have that. If you want to maintain your system and have the highest protection and highest capabilities and highest upgrades at all times, we have different plans for you. But we scale it so it's scalable and affordable 100%.
Hey, you want to grow your own plants? Check out Style Lighting's Grow Kit. It has everything you need to become an expert home grower and bring the power of the sun indoors. Style Lighting uses TCP's high-powered commercial LEDs that deliver twice the output in the market. The Grow Kit has a grow bag, a timer, chains to hang the light, and of course the best in the business lighting system by TCP. Check out stylelighting.shop for more information. Meet Caduceus Science, the alternative wellness company. You know CBD, but how about CBG, CBN? That's right, Caduceus Science produces a range of full-spectrum products, all lab-tested in small batches to maintain the highest quality of products. CaduceusScience.com. Pro Cannabis Media programming is available live and on demand on our Facebook page at Pro Canna Media, on Instagram at Pro Cannabis Media, on LinkedIn also at Pro Cannabis Media, on YouTube and YouTube Live on Pro Cannabis Media, Twitter at Pro Canna Media, and on twitch.tv/Pro Cannabis Media. So like, share, and subscribe to all of our content, newsletters, and shows live or on demand.
welcome to the very first Calling All Growers workshop and webinar. I'm Liz Grow, your host, and really your guide through this amazing, wonderful world of growing, whether you're a home grower, hobbyist, whether you're just interested in learning a little more, or you're a commercial grower and you want to hear from the pros and you want to hear from your peers. This is what we do at Calling All Growers. We bring growers together to share the best information to make you a better grower. And I'm lucky enough to have the experts who joined me last week in the very first Calling All Growers show. Wendy Kornberg, second generation cannabis grower from Humboldt, and Ben Morgan Dillon, founder, head cultivator of Acadia Farms, green facilities specialist, and KNF expert. I know we're supposed to have James Burr as well of Organic Cultivators. He may be popping in. You guys know, this is a growers workshop. This is closed circuit. This isn't live. We can be our normal selves. You guys have stuff to do, a lot of stuff to do. You're chasing sunlight a lot. You have dirt on your hands, so that's really what this workshop's about. So Wendy, I want to turn it over to you right now because you are going to kick things off with a tutorial.
I love it. Chasing sunlight is exactly what we're doing. And we've been transplanting today. So I was like, well, this is great. People often have we found that people have trouble transplanting. It's one of the things that as a grower, it's one of the first skills you need to learn along with watering. And so as I was sitting back there doing this today, I went, well, this is perfect. I'll just set aside a plant and I will bring it out and I will show you guys what we do on our farm when we're transplanting. And it's a very specific way that we do things. I need to grab one bucket, which I forgot. And the beautiful thing is I have children that tend to leave things around, so we can use this. So this is a little clone that was gifted to me. This is a tissue culture clone. I actually don't know the cultivar, so it's kind of fun. It's been about 3 weeks in this pot. It came in a little tiny, tiny, tiny root cube, like the tiniest cube I've ever seen. And we put it in baby roots soil, which is what we always use for our clones and our seedlings for starting at the very, very beginning. But they grow out of it pretty quickly and they need to get bumped up into healthier soil again. Like I said, this is 3 weeks. So
baby root soil. I'm going to be asking you about that at a later date.
Yeah. Yeah. Please. And please, Liz, if you have questions or something isn't clear, definitely interrupt me. I know sometimes I talk fast. So I, try to be mindful of slowing down. I get excited. So I'm like, yay.
Yeah. And you know what, if you have questions out there in the webinar, go ahead and put them in the comments and we will absolutely get to them. So please go ahead, Wendy.
And I'm going to go over this briefly because I know that Ben and I chatted beforehand about who wanted to cover what, and he is going to be covering SES, which is the nutrient maintenance solution that we use for Korean natural farming. I use it also, and that's what this is. So this is a jug of maintenance solution, and basically it's water, fermented plant juice, oriental herbal nutrient, and brown rice vinegar at different ratios. And we've done a lot of side-by-sides. I'm, if you follow me at all, I'm known as the queen of side-by-sides because I'm always like, always have a control group, always have a control group. You need to know what works and you need to know that exactly what you did is the variable that made the difference. We don't have money to waste. We don't have time to waste on small farms. So, what we found, very, very best way to transplant is you take your maintenance solution and I'm going to pour it in a jug.
Maintenance solution. As you're pouring, why is it called maintenance solution?
It's called maintenance solution because with Korean natural farming, you can use this as a general maintenance spray or drench at any time up to once a week. So it's just your general overall nutrient solution.
Okay.
And then I'm putting my plant in my little thing of maintenance solution. I'm going to tip it to the side. Let's see. Well, you get the idea. I'm tipping it to the side so that it's filling up.
I'm like I'm like leaning forward, like, let me see.
So this is just water. And then I'm sitting it in here. The reason I'm doing this is I like to let my plants get a little bit dried out before I transplant. That way, when you're soaking it in this solution, it's actually absorbing all those nutrients. Those roots are hungry for water. So they're going to suck everything up and it's going to give it a boost. And what we've seen is that when we do this, we have very, very little transplant shock. And we've done different types of, soaking and maintenance solution, taking it out of the pot first, leaving it in the pot, putting it in the hole, doing the whole 9 yards. But if if you have a small 4x4 tent, you can take it out of the pot. It's not that big of a deal. You're using maybe, 5 gallons of this stuff total. But if you're on a commercial farm like us, we're transplanting 1,500 clones, per run, per garden. I'm literally not going to make hundreds of gallons of this when I can make 5 to 10 and have that work as well. We also found that when you leave it in the pot, so still in the pot as it's soaking, okay, it doesn't damage the root structure at all. So if you have a really, really root bound plant, if you take it out and it's white roots everywhere and they're all congested up, you do need to tease them out so that they don't continue to coil and strangle themselves. But in this case, we're dinging it perfectly on the spot where we want to be. So once it's nice and wet and I can feel this pot, it's heavy, it's got weight to it, okay? It doesn't feel light, it's dripping water, it's nicely saturated. I'm gonna turn it upside down. And with these particular pots, I push on the bottom right in the middle, but you kind of got to just tease it out a little bit. It's just going to fall right out. And this is where we're at for our root structure. So this is pretty perfect. Okay. It's not root bound at all. They're a little bit growing in circles, but not terrible. So I might just tease out, a couple little ones here, but for the most part, I used to do a lot more like scrunching of the roots, if you will, like, rubbing them and things. And I found that with this, I don't have to do that. So this is time saving. And again, we don't want transplant shock. If you're, it doesn't even matter if you're a home grower or a commercial farmer, you really don't want to set yourself back a week on your time schedule. So when we do this, you can see my soil's holding together well, my roots are holding together well, and it's going to be perfect. I don't need to mess with it. So then this is the step that is one of the SOPs that people don't do. And I highly recommend everybody do this. I have my prep here. We have, this is Lost Coast plant therapy in solution, just because James had some. Normally I would use something that I would make myself. So a JWA soak, whatever you want to do to dip your plant in. Okay. Because we had, yeah. So we had aphids at one point, they are just around. We bring things in on our body. We bring things in without thinking about it. We go to the grow shop, we lean on a bag of dog food, and we bring russet mites home with us. And then we go into our plant room and now our plants have russet mites and we don't know it. So always, always, always when you're transplanting, always dip your plants. So the other great thing about dipping as opposed to spraying is you get really full coverage. Okay, so for us, we just simply, if you're transplanting a 3-foot tall plant, obviously you can't do this, right? Unless you have a 55-gallon drum or something ridiculous. It's not realistic. So in that case, you spray. But if you can dip your plant, you just want to take it and put it in. And what I'm doing is I'm holding it. The soil is above the water line or above the solution line. Okay. And I'm holding it under there basically until the bubbles stop rising or until there's, all the plant surface is covered. It's not holding any air. So it's completely underwater. And then I'm just picking it up. You can let it drip a few times. And then I have my pot that's about, halfway full of dirt or so. And I'm just going to gently set my plant right onto the top of the dirt. Okay, so now we have plant plus soil. Ooh. And then you want to try to make sure that you don't get the surface of your plant, the leaves, try and keep them clean if you can. It's a little difficult sometimes, but now our plant leaves are covered in whatever pest killing thing we're using. Soaps are great, you guys, like potassium. Oh, I always mess it up. Potassium salts of fatty acids, right? Is I think what is generally called. It's a safer soap, if you will. There's no extra pesticides and it's a suffocant. Suffocant and a desiccant, depending on the temperature. And so all your soft-bodied insects are going to like shrivel up and die because of this. But if you then cover it with dirt, you're kind of negating what you just did. So try to like use your hand to hold back your plant and then put your soil in. And I'm just gonna,
Wendy, your jewelry game is on point. I love it.
I know you guys are getting close-ups of the rings.
It's so good. It's so good.
So as I'm
like glam
checking-
farming.
Totally. We farm in lipstick and jewelry sometimes.
It happens. Okay,
so
so what are you doing?
So now the plant is got soil up all around it. Okay. So
Yeah.
we've kind of covered it. All the edges are tucked in there. And then I'm just going to use my hands to just kind of gently press down along the sides. So basically around here, around these edges, just kind of tucking it into bed, if you will. I'm not smashing it. I'm not like squishing it in there. We don't want to compact our soil, but we want to get rid of any of those spots of air, those air gaps where there's no soil, because the roots will hit that and they won't go into that space as well. So then if you're done with your solution, so this was that maintenance solution that I dipped the root ball in, you can use this to water it in, or you can just use plain water. And when we're watering in, we want to go around, the entire pot. You want to get all the surface of the soil. When you're transplanting, it's really important to water in really, really well. When we're transplanting into the ground on the field, we go over it once, we go over it twice, and then we go over it all the in-between spaces as well. We want the ground completely saturated. And ideally then, not like, you don't want to drown it, but, really water it in well. And then ideally your mulch is there to maintain that moisture level. And you're usually not watering for at least a week after that if you do it right when you transplant.
Really? And why?
Yeah.
What's the point of that? You just want it to settle, or?
Well, the thing is, you don't want to overwater. Okay. So if you're watering in really well when you transplant, the water is going to be saturating the entire media. So, or medium, I should say. So all that medium is going to be holding all that moisture. If you have good mulch on top, then that mulch is preserving that moisture. It's not evaporating out. So as the roots start growing out, they're going out into those places of moisture that haven't been uptaken by the plants yet. And really what this does is it's signaling the plant to push roots out. Okay. So roots go out. You don't want them going down. You don't want them truncating. You want them filling in all the spaces. There's this whole as above, so below thing. This is more of an as below, so above. We want the structure to mimic what's going on up above us.
Yeah.
So-
that makes perfect sense. That makes total sense. So you're really, you're training the roots or inviting the roots to reach out and get that good stuff. And I can understand then why you wouldn't overwater, because you want them to reach out, and find what's there and use that first.
And what they're doing in that case, if they're seeking water, they're also going to hit those pockets of nutrients that haven't been utilized by the plants yet. So now, if you're amending your whole soil bed, those nutrients will be available as the plant grows. As the roots hit it, they hit new nutrients and new nutrients and new nutrients, and they have everything they need for the entire life cycle of the plant. If you've got your soil life appropriate, your biology is there, your micronutrients and trace minerals. If everything's available in the soil and you have a healthy soil food web, you won't need to top dress, you won't need to fertilize. There are exceptions, but there's a few cultivars that you can really push with nutrients. And a lot of times we are pushing cannabis, but you don't have to, is the thing. So this is done. So this has now been transplanted up from the 4-inch pot into a 1-gallon pot. And she'll be fine in this. So this is, I think, a 3-week-old plant, 3.5 weeks, something like that. So she'll be fine in this for another 4 weeks or so. And then she'll go into her final resting place. The other thing I do at this point is I want to push growth into the laterals, not straight up. So I go ahead at this time and I would take the top off. So I've now taken the growth, and some people bend it. You don't have to take it off. I don't have time to like gently bend, and we're small. We're a big farm with a small crew. So I rip it off. Again, do as you will, try it out. What works on my farm might not work on your farm.
Right.
So, do a side by side, do it with some and not with others. But the idea is we've taken the growing hormones off of this, and now it's going to push it into these laterals. And this will turn into a very nice, full, bushy plant really quickly. And I would not do this necessarily for a full-term plant. This is something we do for clones. We do it for our light depth. We do it for what we call the turn and burn, because you want it to fill out more space faster on the horizontal rather than on the lateral.
Okay, when would you not do it? When would
I don't
you
I don't
hold
I don't
back?
top my full term plants that are from seed.
Mhm.
If it's going to go, I started it in spring and I'm taking it all the way through summer into fall, and I'm harvesting in October, September, October, November.
Okay.
I don't do any pruning of those plants. There are, why is this not charging?
Must be nice long of an outdoor season.
Yeah.
Like October, sometimes November, I'm like,
I've harvested in December before. It's not the best idea, but sometimes you can get away with it.
Talk about full term. Definitely. Okay. So you don't do that on your full term plants. Okay. So you mentioned that Ben has a recipe. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, and just really quickly, this year, James really does like low stress training, and it is really beneficial, but I honestly, we usually have never had time. Yields do increase if you can train your plants to go out more. So in that case, and way back in the day when I only had 4 or 5 gardens that had 10 to 16 plants each, I definitely did more training. I definitely, bent things out through the cages and, made them stretch and made them take up more space. But, there is a cost benefit analysis you have to do on how much time you're spending versus how much yield you're actually getting.
Yep.
So, low stress training. We'll probably do some fun little side by sides this year. Maybe we'll top some of our seed starts and maybe we'll not top others and train them different directions. But again, it just depends on how much time we actually have, because we've got a lot of projects going on this year. So
right. You're farming, it's hands-on. And you brought up a great point. This is, something that I want everybody to really hear and understand in the audience, that, your success is dictated by you. It's about what your intended outcome is. If you're a first-time grower, is your best outcome to keep it alive and to maybe smoke something at the end of it all, or if it's to scale your business and increase your yields. This show, and ideally these webinars will be here for you to get closer to those goals. So I just love, though, that the folks on this panel have done it all, and do know how to speak that language of the rookie grower, all the way to, the commercial producer, as you guys are at Sunibus.
Hey, you want to grow your own plants? Check out Style Lighting's Grow Kit. It has everything you need to become an expert home grower and bring the power of the sun indoors. Style Lighting uses TCP's high-powered commercial LEDs that deliver twice the output in the market. The Grow Kit has a grow bag, a timer, chains to hang the light, and of course the best in the business lighting system by TCP. Check out stylelighting.shop for more information. Meet Caduceus Science, the alternative wellness company. You know CBD, but how about CBG, CBN? That's right, Caduceus Science produces a range of full-spectrum products, all lab-tested in small batches to maintain the highest quality of products. CaduceusScience.com.